Good afternoon, everybody. Today is the fourth day of our presentations. We have gathered in this afternoon session to listen the presentations by semester 2 students on Indian and Western poetics. So let us start with the first presentation. We will have the first presentation by Radhika, and she will make a presentation on the unspoken in poetry, aesthetic experience from Ras to Dhwani. Yes, you can start. Yeah.
Hello everyone, myself Radhika Mehta, and today I am going to present this topic, the unspoken in poetry aesthetic experience from Ras to Dhwani. So I started my topic with this Sanskrit shloka, Shrungara Hasya Karuno Rudra Vira Bhayanakaha Bibhasa Adbhuta Shantascha Rasaha Sarve Na Ravrasaha. These are my academic information and presentation details. Table of content. So now let's start with research questions. How does the use of suggestion as a dhvani enable the evocation of aesthetic experience by emphasizing the unspoken in poetry? So, my hypothesis is the aesthetic experience of rasa in poetry is primarily achieved through dhvani, as the use of suggestions and the unspoken creates deeper emotional and imaginative engagement that direct expressions. Now let's start with introduction. Indian literary theory offers a distinctive approach to understanding literature by prioritizing aesthetic experience over literal meaning. Unlike many Western theories that emphasize structure or form, Indian poetics focuses on how a literary works is felt and experienced by the readers or the audience. Rasa refers to emotional essence or aesthetic pleasure derived from a work of art, and while Dhvani refers to the power of suggestion or implied meaning. Dhvani is a tool of sound and voice. So, this theories demonstrate that poetry does not merely convey information, rather, it evokes an emotional and imaginative response. Theoretical background, rasa and dhvani. So ras theory is said that the theory of rasa was first systematically articulated by Bharat Muni in the Natya Shastra. Rasa literally means taste or essence, as we know that, and the refers to the emotional experience realized by the audience. So, rasa is not simply the emotion expressed is a text, but universalized and aestheticized emotions. So, theoretical background is expressed to ras and dhvani is explains to how literature creates emotional experience like love, sorrow, sadness, and anger in readers or the audience. So it was developed by Bharat Muni in Natya Shastra, as we know that. So rasa is the aesthetic pleasure we feel while reading or watching the art. Dhvani theory. The theory of Dhvani was developed by Anand Vardhana in his work Dhvanyalok. Dhvani means sound or resonance, but in literary theory, it refers to suggestions or implied the meaning. So, according to this theory, the deepest meaning of the poetry is not directly stated, and words function as indicators or of deeper significance. And the third one is meaning emerge through implication rather than explicit expressions. So, the Dhvani refers to literal meanings and secondary meanings. So it focuses on suggestions like implied meaning and the meaning of the content also. So rather than direct expressions, the deeper meaning of poetry is often too unspoken, but it highlights as a felt. So now we can see that the all including the nine rasa. So the first one is picturized as a Kathakali. We can see that in Kathakali expressed to Karun Ras. Then also we know that about Shiv Tandav. So is Rudra Swarup, and the third and then third one is characters of Shakuntala. It's expressed to Abhinan Shakuntalam, and it's highlights to Shringaras. So the fourth one is Bhayanak Ras in Narsiv Avatar, the avatars of Dasha Avatar, and the five one is Hasyaras. So as we know that it's reflects to laughing Buddha characters. So the sixth one is uh, Adbhut Ras. So Adbhut Ras, it's reflect to the Virat Swarup of the Lord Krishna, and then we see that the character of Maharani Lakshmi Bai and Jhansi Ki Rani as expressed to Veer Ras, and then Bibhasa Ras, it refers to some kinds of fears and the emotions of in a Sanskrit. Bibhasa and Dar also. So the final ras is Shant ras. It means to some kinds of peace, and as we know that in Ramayanas, the character of Ram and Sita, it's expressed to Shantras. Now let's move on the interrelation between rasa and dhvani. Rasa and dhvani are instinctually connected, forming a unified aesthetic process. Like dhvani acts as the medium or vehicles, and rasa is the final aesthetics experiences. So dhvani helps to produce like a ras, and the beauty of poetry lies in what is not directly but said, but a suggestion. Like dhvani acts as the medium or vehicles, and rasa is the final aesthetic experience, emotions, and effects. So, the unspoken poetry, the central idea of this topic is that the true power of poetry lies in the unspoken. Poetry often avoids direct statements and instead relies on the imagery, symbolism, and suggestive language. So, this creates a space where readers actively engage with the text and construct meaning. As the poetry uses imagery, symbolisms, and suggestive language, as instead of saying sadness, a poet show that a silent evening, and readers feel like the emotions and in depth also. Modern relevance of Rus theory. Despite its ancient origins, Rus theory remains highly relevant in modern literary and artistic context. R.V. Patakar argues that Rasa continues to provide valuable insight into contemporary criticisms. So, in modern context, films uses visual suggestion to evoke emotions. Contemporary poetry realized that on ambiguity and symbolisms, and readers' responses theory emphasize audience and interpretations. And so the film uses visual suggestions like to create emotions through the characters, and modern poetry uses ambiguity and symbolisms, readers responses, and theory focuses on the audience and their interpretations and emotions also. So these are the infographics of the nine rasas, which can I also include in my this presentation topics. So this is the overview of that. The aesthetic of human emotions: Shringar ras, Shant ras, Adbhut ras, Bibhas ras, Bhayanak ras, Hasya ras, Karun ras, Rodra ras, and Veer ras. These are the hypothesis justification. The hypothesis is supported by the both theoretical and practical considerations. Suggestions like engage the readers more actively than direct expressions, and emotional responses are stronger when meaning is inferred. And scholarly works confirm that rasa depends on indirect expressions. So psychological studies show that implied meaning is that triggers deeper emotional processing. Thus, the unspoken elements is not secondary but central to aesthetic experiences. These are my learning outcomes. Uh, Conclusions: the explorations of rasa and dhvani reveals that poetry is not merely a form of expression but a medium of aesthetic experiences. The unspoken dimensions allows the reader to engage deeply with the text, as we noted, the transforming simple words into profound emotional and intellectual experiences. Through the dhvani, poetry suggested meaning that are not explicitly stated, and through rasas, these meanings are felt and internalized. Thus, Indian aesthetic theory provides a timeless framework that continues to enrich our understanding of literature and art. These are works cited, and now question are welcome.
So my question is that can meaning as exist in poetry without being directly expressed?
Okay, so yes, also the aesthetic and poetry is highlight the uh, through dhvani meaning exits and as a suggestions, and which is fully realized rasa in the reader's experience, emotions, and their own interpretations also. Anyone else?
Can meaning exist in poetry without being directly expressed?
You can ask another question. So okay, so the unspoken invites interpretations, making the reader actively construct rasa through the dhvani, and also refers to dhvani and a suggestion in our interpretations and emotions also. So this is from my side. Thank you so much.
So this is why people say there is this problem of brain fog, brain fry. We are completely absent. What is going on? આપણે જ્યાં હાજર છે ત્યાં શું થઈ રહ્યું છે એની ખબર જ નથી કઈ. એટલે આપણે જે પ્રશ્ન પૂછવાનો કોઈ પૂછી નાખે છે તોય આપણે છાના મુના એ જ પાછા પૂછીએ છીએ પ્રશ્ન. એટલે એટલું અવેરનેસ નથી કે this we have to change. Why this happens? That is what people say. The digital things lead to brain fog, brain fry. We are not aware about where we are living, what we are doing, completely lost in something else. So this is what we have to fight. We have to be conscious of what we are doing. If you are not aware and conscious, then such simple, silly mistakes keep on happening.
She sent me.
શું અમે થોડા નાના બાળકો છે પૂછો કોને પ્રશ્ન પૂછવાનો છે, કોણ કરશે, હવે ચાલો અમે કિકલાઓ છીએ કઈ કે જાણે કિન્ડર ગાર્ડનમાં હોય એ રીતે ડીલિંગ અમારી સાથે કરીએ, પણ એકવાર ન કરો એટલે આવું થાય. This is our experience. If you don't do repeat the same stupid things every day, somebody will commit mistake. That's why it is necessary to repeat several things every day to give a reminder who will do what work. The example is before you, so we don't have to prove it. તમારી સામે જ ઉદાહરણ છે એટલે બધું સાબિતી આપવાની જરૂર નથી રહેતી કે આપણે કઈ રીતે કામ કરતા હોઈએ ને કઈ રીતે કામ કરવું પડે. આપણે આર્ટ્સ વાળા છીએ, આપણે ફ્રોઝન થઈ ગયું હોય દિમાગ થોડું, એને સચેત કરવા માટે સતત એને ટપારતું રહેવું પડે. એને ટપારીએ નહીં એટલે તરત પાછું સૂઈ જાય. દિમાગને તરત સુવાની ટેવ પડી ગઈ હોય. So you have to remain extra alert. Otherwise errors will keep on happening.
And today I am talking about Rasa theory in Indian cinema, a study of aesthetic experience. These are my academic details and presentation details. So my research question is that in what ways does the classical Rasa theory provide a structural and emotional framework for contemporary Indian cinematic storytelling? And my hypothesis is that Rasa theory continues to serve as the primary aesthetic framework in Indian cinema by shaping the way actors perform, influencing the use of music and visual elements, and guiding how audience engage emotionally with films. Despite the impact of modern technology and changing cinematic techniques, the fundamental aesthetic structure of Indian cinema remains deeply rooted in classical Rasa theory. So let's start with an introduction. Indian cinema is not just entertainment. It is deeply connected to India's classical aesthetic traditions. So these traditions focus on creating a strong emotional experience for the audience. One of the most important ideas in this tradition is rasa, which means the feeling of emotion that the audience experiences while watching a performance. So this concept comes from the Natya Shastra written by Bharat Muni, which explains how art should express emotions. So even though drama has changed into modern cinema, the main aim remains the same, to make the audience feel emotions. So in this way, Indian cinema continues the legacy of classical aesthetic in a modern form. Let's talk about a theoretical framework. What is rasa? Rasa is a key concept in Indian aesthetic theory, meaning the emotional essence or flavor of a performance. It is not just the emotion shown by the performer, but the aesthetic experience which is felt by the audience. So rasa goes beyond ordinary feelings like happiness, sadness. So it is a refined and universal emotion that allows the audience to connect with the performance on a deeper level, which turning simple emotions into meaningful artistic experience. So rasa is completed when the audience emotionally connects with the performance. So according to Abhinav Gupta, rasa is created through the interaction between the performance and the audience perception, so making it the final goal of artistic expressions. Now let's move towards the mechanics of rasa and performance. So rasa is not created automatically. It is produced through a process that connects the actor's emotions with the audience experience. So these words bhava and anubhava. Bhava means inner emotions. These are the emotions felt and expressed by the actor, such as love, anger, or sadness. So they form the emotional base of the performance. Then anubhava means outer expressions. These are the visible expressions of emotion, including facial expressions, gesture, body language, and dialogue, through which the actor communicates feeling to the audience. So through the performance, these emotions are shaped and presented in such a way that the audience does not just observe them, but experiences through them as a rasa or aesthetic emotion. So in this way, performance act as a bridge that transforms the actor's emotions into a meaningful emotional experience for the audience. Now, from Natya Shastra to cinema, the technical bridge. The principles of the Natya Shastra developed by Bharat Muni continue to influence modern cinema, but are now enhanced through technological advancement. Natya Shastra as a foundation. Natya Shastra provided guidelines for acting, music, and emotional expressions aimed at creating a rasa in audience. Mass media as a megaphone. Cinema amplifies rasa using technology such as close-ups, surround sound editing, and slow motion, making emotional stimuli more intense and impactful than in traditional stages. Enhanced emotional experience expressions. Visual and sound techniques allow for filmmakers to highlight emotions in a more focused and powerful way, guiding the audience response. And the mass experience, unlike theater, which reaches a limited audience, cinema as a mass media enables a million of viewers to experience the same dominant emotion simultaneously, creating a shared or collective aesthetic experience. Now let's talk about rasa in the context of popular cinema. Indian popular cinema places strong emphasis on emotional engagement, where the primary goal is to make the audience feel deeply rather than simply follow a logical or a realistic narrative. Emotional engagement over realism. So unlike many western cinematic traditions that focus on realism and logic, and Indian cinema prioritize affect, meaning the emotional impact created through the story, performance, and visuals. The Bollywood synthesis. The popular cinema integrates multiple elements such as narrative, music, dance, and performance into a unified form. So this combination is not accidental, but a deliberate technique to enhance emotional expressions. So ras utpatti means creation of rasa. The blending of these elements aimed at ras utpatti, or the creation of aesthetic emotion in the audience. So each component, song, dialogue, or visual works together to evoke a specific emotional response. So as a result, Indian cinema offers a complete sensory and emotional experience, where viewers are not just observers but active participants in feeling of the story. These are now rasas. Now let's take one example of Rodra Rasa in Kantara movie. The Kantara is rooted in ritual and the connection between humans and the divine, making it a strong example of traditional aesthetic in modern cinema. The film is driven by Rodra Rasa, expressed through themes of conflict, divine power, and intense emotional energy. So elements like a loud rhythmic music, dramatic lightning, and dark visual tones enhance the sense of divine anger and intensity, deepening the audience emotional experience. How the rasa theory relevance in modern time. So rasa theory continues to function as a foundation of Indian cinema even in the age of modern mass media and global influence. While cinema as a mass media is shaped by global technology, the emotional core of Indian films remains rooted in rasa, as it reflects what Indian audience culturally recognize and connect with. So the shift from traditional theater to cinema has not replaced classical theory. Instead, it has allowed rasa to adapt and remain relevant in a new medium. This is my infographic of world presentation. Now conclude this. Uh, this study concludes that classical rasa theory continues to provide both a structural and emotional framework from contemporary Indian cinematic storytelling. So, Indian films are not only constructed around narrative progressions, but are carefully designed to guide the audience through a sequence of emotional experiences. Elements such as expressive acting, music, visual design, and cinematic techniques work together to evoke a specific rasa, ensuring a deep audience engagement. So, therefore, it can be concluded that rasa theory is not merely a classical concept but a living and dynamic framework that continues to shape the emotional and structural foundation of Indian cinema. This is my justification of research question and hypothesis, and these are my learning outcomes. These are my references, and thank you. If you have any question.
So my question is, how is storytelling in Indian cinema different from Hollywood in terms of emotional engagement?
Indian cinema and Hollywood different in emotional engagement. In Indian cinema is more emotional driven, and Hollywood cinema is more realistic and subtle, in which emotions are shown naturally and not in exaggerated way, but in simple way, and which Hollywood cinema which is focus more on story. So the difference in Indian cinema and Hollywood is in a way of emotional engagement. Thank you. Anyone?
So my question is, do you agree that Indian cinema overuses emotion? If so, does this strengthen or weaken the overall cinematic experience?
According to my view, in I would not say that emotions are uses strongly, but emotions are an important part of storytelling, which help to connect audiences, and I think sometimes if emotions are exaggerated, emotions are narrative in exaggerated way, So it depends on how the film is use emotions in a balanced way. So thank you, this is from my side.
नेटवर्क नेटवर्क सर बोला संजय सर 2 मिनिट नेटवर्क Good afternoon, everyone. Myself Priya Rathod, and today my presentation topic is tragic emotion and aesthetic experience, interpreting Macbeth and Hamlet through Russ theory and cinematic adaptations. These are my academic details and presentation details. This is table of contents. So my research question is, how does Russ theory reinterpret the tragic emotions in Macbeth and Hamlet, and in what ways to do the cinematic adaptations Makbul and Heather transform Shakespearean sorrow into a culturally localized yet universally resonant aesthetic experience for contemporary audiences? Hypothesis. This study hypothesizes that the tragic emotions in Macbeth and Hamlet evoke a universal Karun Ras, transforming personal suffering into an aesthetic experience that goes beyond Western catharsis. The cinematic adaptations Makbul and Haider further intensify this experience by localizing Shakespearean emotions within Indian culture context that demonstrate how Russ theory creates deeper emotional engagement and cross-culture aesthetic resonance. So let's start with the introduction. Shakespeare's tragedies explore ambition, betrayal, loss, as well as psychological conflict. When interpreted through Russ theory, these emotions are not merely dramatic events but aesthetic experience. Russ theory explains how emotions are artistically evoked through the bhav and vibhav. In Indian cinematic adaptations, further reinterpret these tragedies within modern cultural context, connecting Western literature with Eastern philosophical aesthetics. Fundamentals of Russ theory. Russ theory explained in Bharat Muni's Natya Shastra that describes how emotions in art produce aesthetic pleasure. Russ emerges from the interaction of determinates, consequence, and transitory emotions. Among the 8 rases, Karun, associated with sorrow and compassion, is central to tragedy. Through artistic detachment, audiences transform painful emotions into transcendental aesthetic experience, eventually reaching the calmness of Santras. tragic rasas in Shakespearean drama. Shakespearean tragedies evoke multiple rasas simultaneously. Karun ras appears through suffering and loss, while Bhayanak ras emerges from supernatural fear and uncertainty. Hamlet's grief generates shock, which leads to other emotional state like depression and anger. These rasas combine to create a complex emotional experience, allowing audience to aesthetically release tragedy rather than simply feeling despair. Catharsis versus Ras, Eastern and Western views. Western tragic theory focuses on Aristotle's concept of catharsis, which purges pity and fear from the audience. In contrast, Indian aesthetic emphasize on the relishing of emotions through Ras rather than eliminating feelings. Ras transforms them into aesthetic enjoyment. This difference represents how Indian theory offers a more contemplative and transcendental interpretation of tragedy. Macbeth evoking Bhayanak and Rodra Ras. In Macbeth, ambition triggers Rodra Ras, expressed through anger, violence, and tyranny. The witches' prophecies introduce Bhayanak Ras that creates supernatural fear and paranoia. Blood imagery represent the emotional experience that transforms guilt and anxiety into aesthetic tragedy. These rasas ultimately lead to audiences toward uh, this Ras audience this imagery intensify jugupsa and bhaya that transforms personal guilt into universal tragic beauty as Sthai Bhavas conflict with Sanchari Bhav. Makbul cinematic adaptation of Macbeth. Vishal Bhardwaj relocates Macbeth to Mumbai's underworld, heightening Bhayanak Ras through gritty visuals and betrayal that echo the play's supernatural dread into realistic crime and political corruption. Cinematic techniques like song and montage deepen rasa experience, turning a spectator into uh, active relisher of sorrow and fear. As movie have added more realistic and convincing diction. This adaptation exemplifies how Indian cinema follows traditional unique sutras of aesthetic aspect, providing relish and released to audience through tragic bhav. Hamlet, Shok and Karun Ras in depth. Uh, from the perspective of Sthai Bhavas, when Shakespeare's Hamlet is judged, it becomes clear that Shok, after the death of Hamlet's father, played an important role in deciding the next courses of action by Hamlet. It is a form Shok, a form of Sanchari Bhav, originates in Hamlet's psyche in the form of depression that highlights his human flaws and psychic connection. Haider as a modern Hamlet. Haider, in Bhardwaj's adaptation of Hamlet, relocates the story of Kashmir by portraying political violence and identify crisis and personal loss. The film represents Karun Ras. Haider's internal conflicts mirror Hamlet's existential dilemma. However, the film ends with protagonist rejecting revenge that guides the audience towards Shantras and reflecting as the cycle of violence and reconciliation. Cinematic intermediality and Shakespeare. Adaptations like Makbul and Haider represent intermediality where literature and cinema interact creatively. Visual storytelling, music, and dialogue expand the emotional intensify of Shakespeare's narratives. Through these cinematic techniques, Ras becomes more immersive, allowing audience to experience tragic emotion in culturally specific yet universally understandable forms. Aesthetic experience through Ras. Ras theory emphasizes the role of Sri Hridaya or sensitive spectator.
who actively participate in relishing emotional experiences through dramatic and cinematic performance. Negative emotions such as sorrow or fear are transformed into aesthetic pleasure. This process ultimately leads to santras, a state of reflective calm and moral understanding. Lesson for today: rust in modern conflicts. Shakespearean tragedies remain relevant today because they addresses universal human struggles such as ambition, betrayal, and identify conflict. When interpreted through rust theory, these stories offer moral insight and emotional healing. They encourage empathy, critical reflection, not and awareness of consequences of violence and power in contemporary society. Hypothesis justified. Textual analysis of Shakespeare's tragedy and cinematic adaptations supports the hypothesis of this study. Both literature and film evoke Karun Rus by transforming personal suffering into universal aesthetic experience. The emotional engagement produced by Rus theory goes beyond the ideas of catharsis that encourages deeper reflection and cultural resonance. Key insight: presentations highlight how Rust theory unifies Shakespearean tragedy under a universal emotional framework. Scholars represent that Rust, like Karun and Bhayanak Rust, appear clearly in both the text and film. The study also shows that cinema enhances this emotional experience through visual storytelling and music. Conclusion: Rush theory provides a powerful framework for interpreting Shakespearean tragedy. It transforms suffering into aesthetic experience and emotional insight. Cinematic adaptations such as Makbul and Haider strengthen this interpretation by localizing Shakespeare's narrative within Indian cultural context. Thus, Rasa theory bridges Eastern and Western aesthetic and keeps Shakespeare relevant for contemporary audiences. These are my references, and thank you so much. Questions are welcome.
If tragic art transforms suffering into compassion through Karun Rasa, can literature and cinema help modern society move from conflict and revenge toward empathy and peace?
Yes, by allowing audience to experience emotion aesthetically rather than destructively, tragic narratives cultivate empathy, moral reflection, and understanding. This emotional transformation ultimately leads to santras, and that symbolize harmony and ethical awareness to society. Next question.
So, Priya, my question is, can Russ theory be considered a universal aesthetic framework for global literary studies?
Rush theory originates from the Indian dramaturgy. Its emphasis on universal emotional experience that allows it to function as a powerful comparative framework for global literature. By analyzing emotional structure rather than the cultural studies, Rush theory can interpret text from the diverse traditions that represents the shared human capacity for aesthetic emotions. Thank you so much. This is from my side.
uh, the conflict of today, why are they not resolved? That connection you'll have to give. Today we live in a time where there are so many conflicts, so many countries are at war with each other. So internal strife outside India, global, so many. So if art can do that, move from conflict and revenge towards empathy and peace, so what is problem? Is that not such kind of art which has karuna ras? That's why it is happening. That connection is required to think about it. So why today's time do not find any solution in literature? Or has today's literature also become full of violence, hate? Yeah, that is why it is enraging rather than leading towards karuna. To say in American literature also, America is at war, but that connection, even through Hemingway also, we have seen that it was not made. Hemingway is talking about war, and still America is at war. So, how do we see today's warmongering, or whose fault it is? Is it Iran's fault? Is it Israel's fault? Is it America's fault? Is it Russia, Ukraine? What way? When Russia attacks Ukraine, we say that it is Russia's fault. We do not allow Russian sports people to participate in any global event. If they, when the Olympic was there, Paris Olympic, so they were able to participate without the flag of Russia, as belonging to. So Russia's name is not allowed to be used in any sporting events at a global level. That is a ban on Russia. But in case of Israel or America, why nobody is talking about such ban? Why there we see? So how this the mighty people, how they govern the world from their own rules, and we can sanction Russia or China, but not America. So that all should come when we talk about American literature, and American wars and other thing also should be connected.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today's my presentation's topic is when art offends Kshemendra's theory of Ochintya to contemporary debates in Padmavat and stand-up comedies. Here is my academic detail and presentation details. Here is table of contents. And my research question is how does Kshemendra's ancient theory explains modern weaponized offense taking in democratic media? And hypothesis one is claims that classical propriety still unconsciously governs audience aesthetic receptions today. And hypothesis 2 suggests that modern political climates deliberately manufacture offense for strategic gain. We examine how different artistic medium constantly test the limits of the manufacture boundaries. In introduction, classical Indian aesthetic deeply analyzed the necessary emotional connection between art and its audience. Kshemendra's proposed Ochitya as the supreme unyielding principle dictating artistic harmony and cultural context. When contemporary art violates these expected norms, audiences experience severe aesthetic and moral disruption. In today's organized group, heavily amplified this aesthetic disruption into massive national political crisis. In Farhad Mustafa observed that in his article, stand-up comedy serves as a platform for political criticism in India. Kshemendra's theory of Auchitya. Auchitya demands that every single element of artwork perfectly suits its perfect specific cultural context. It ensures that the emotional flavor of rasa remains completely undisturbed for receiving audience. In Pandey's article, we can find that India aesthetic suggests that through the harmony of art, the self shines in its Ananda aspects. This ancient critical framework perfectly describes the modern psychological trigger of taking deeply cultural offense. If we see this diagram, the hierarchical architecture of Kshemendra's theory of Ochintya. Chari notes that in Sanskrit critical tradition, the sole consideration in deciding the propriety of form and matter is the end of decline, the rasas. In Pandey established that aesthetic is the science and philosophy of the independent art. The aesthetics of offense and headspin. Maheshwari argues we must critically examine the violence of the offense taking in contemporary democratic. Modern offense taking frequently moves beyond genuine aesthetic hurt into manufactured performative political theater. Organized groups strategically weaponize perceived breaches of propriety of consolidate their own social power. Obsolete law designed to protect vulnerable minorities are frequently missed to silence dissenting artistic entirely. Padmavat and historical memory. The film Padmavat sparked widespread protest over its cinematic depiction of legendary queen. In the research of Unial and Kumar says that film was based on fictional poem titled Padmavat, what is written by Malik Muhammad's poem written in 1514 AD. Protesters loudly claimed that portrayal of violated culture, propriety, and disrespected traditional Rajput historical honor. Such violent societal clashes demonstrate a serve breakdown in modern aesthetic tolerance and critical reading. If we see the danger of blurring of functional source material and sacred historical memory that triggered in the Padmavat controversy. Unial and Kumar established the film is based on fictional poem, yet protest treated its subject as inviolable historical truth. The violence of offense taking. Cinematic censorship in India increasingly yield to extrajudicial threat and massive organized mob violence. This institutional failure creates profound chilling effect where creator primitively self-censor to avoid repercussion. Both highlight the state apparatus and its rhetoric of moral panic, public protest, and political pressure against cinema. Radical group leveraged the terrifying threat of physical violence to demand complete nationwide movie bans. Comedy and boundary of trust. Stand-up comedy rigorously tests societal limits throughout the direct engagement and highly proactive, unpolished humor. The entire genre relies on an intimate, unmediated psychological connection between the performer and their audience. Abraham explains that the relationship between the comedian and her audience is understood by the way of trust. When comedians deliberately breach cultural propriety, the resulting offense is immediate, visceral, and highly personal. The structural vulnerability of the comedian before the audience, whose trust must be maintained. Abraham argues that the relationship between the comedian and audience is understood by the way of trust. Stand up as radical criticism. Stand up thrives in contexts where traditional media faces censorship, allowing radical political dissents. They boldly tackle sensitive socio-political issues that maintain media systematically and avoid due to immense pressure. This artist differential frequently result in such legal harassment and coordinated online abuse campaign against the performers. Comedy thus function as the crucial alternative democratic tool. So my hypothesis justification is our analysis successfully confirms that modern audience will implicitly demand Shemendra's concept of contextual cultural propriety. The Padmavat protest tragically demonstrate how perceived breaches of historical propriety active ignite real physical violence. Conversely, comedy show how artists strategically violate this propriety to deliberately provoke necessary political awakening. In response to outrage, the court ultimately declared the freedom of expression supreme, give security for Padmavat release. So we confidently conclude that modern offense is simultaneously an authentic aesthetic reaction and a manufactured political tool. In conclusion, Shemendra Swachitya remained a remarkable, powerful critical lens for analyzing contemporary clashes over vital and artistic expression. We must vigorously protect creative freedom against the rising dangerous tide of manufactured political outrage campaign. The Padmavat and the stand-up comedy controversy strongly illustrate the alarming fragility of free speech today. Provocative art must be allowed to challenge established propriety without the facing the threat of mob violence. So consequently, laws seeking to limit the scope and growth of hate speech need to have substantial measures. Here my references and thank you. Now questions are welcome.
So my question is, in public controversies, how can one distinguish between authentic aesthetic offense and manufactured political outrage?
If we see authentic aesthetic offense, we the public will react directly when stand-up comedian or the movie directly hurt them or they cross the limit. We can see it is the authentic aesthetic offense. When we manufacture political outrage, when some organization or group deliberately pretend that our cultural and historical history are contemplated and the public and the comedian is hurt us, it is maybe become a manufactured political outrage. If we see Padmavat film, it is the based on the poem, but organization or group pretend that it is our real sacred history, so we can distinguish them. But if we see in today, both are mixed up. People are sometimes authentic aesthetic offense and sometimes manufactured political outrage mix.
One of the things that you can see here in this question is this, that aesthetic offense is not violent. Yeah? It is like a dialogue. People disagree with some art, so they express their disagreement with sense of respect. Whereas manufactured political outrage is full of violence.
Yes.
They try to ransack the place. The place is destroyed. The humans are attacked. Labeling of the character happens. So lots of such kind of things happen. Physical violence. Now cancel culture operates, or people do lots of bad things. They speak a lot of bad thing on social media. So that is manufactured political outrage. Whereas on the other side, so there are many films, like for example, Da Vinci Code was a novel also and film, and Christians were not happy with that film. So in America, they used to stand with placard outside theater, like requesting other people that don't watch this film, it hurts our sentiments. But they will not beat the people who goes to watch the film. They will not destroy the theater. So that also is the outrage of the Christians, but with a kind of a decency. People do that. Or people can make another film against film, a comedy against comedy, art against art. That also is the way that how it can be replied instead of going towards violence. When it is outwardly violent, there are more chances that it is manufactured by some backing, some political support.
How can Kshemendra's ancient Ochitya justly govern diverse globalized contemporary art of forms?
શરૂ જ છે શરૂ જ છે બધું હેલો શરૂ જ શરૂ છે Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sagar Chavda. Today's my presentation topic is the aesthetics and purification, a comparative study of poetics and Natya Shastra. Here are my academic and presentation details. Here is the table of content. My research question is, to what extent do Aristotle's poetics and Bharat Muni's Natya Shastra diverge in their structural and psychological mechanism, and how do they ultimately converge in the teleological aim of mental purification? My hypothesis is, while Greek and Indian aesthetics operate on fundamentally opposed axes, both frameworks achieve a parallel purification of the mind through the purgative clash of catharsis or the translucent stillness of rasa. Introduction: the dual pillars of classical aesthetics. Poetics and Natya Shastra serve as the absolute anchors of for Western and Eastern dramatic theory. Divergent worldviews. The critic argues that the two definitions of drama proceeds out of two very different ways of looking at the world, which is time and history. The Indian concentration on situation or circumstances is in keeping with the outlook of the central Hindu tradition, as the Greek emphasis upon action typifies their view of men is in history. Placing Athens and India in dialogue reveals how theoretical illusion processes reality and achieves psychological clarity. The object of imitation, action versus situation. While mimesis is clearly an essential element in both the definitions, both the definitions really talks about mimesis. Mimesis means to imitate. But it is to be noted that the objects of imitation are different. The difference between imitating action and imitating situation, imitating action is for the Greek drama, and imitating situation is for the Sanskrit drama, is of a profound significance. The Greek framework states in the definition of the drama that tragedy then is an imitation of an action, and the Indian framework says that the drama, as I have devised, is a mimicry of actions and conducts of people, which is based on their situation. So the Greek framework demands a conflict and a swift movement toward crisis through external and internal clashes, while the Indian framework weight is given to moments of equilibrium, sensed, savored, and reflected upon rather than resolved through combat. The architecture of time, history versus eternity. If the senses of time underlying the action is the clue to the quality of action itself, the Greek emphasis is on action and the Indian interest in situation and circumstances become perfectly understandable. The source of time underlying the action is the clue to the quality of the action itself, not the place content, but the form and quality of action will be known by the senses of time, which informs it. They saw time as essentially past. Therefore, novelty, newness was excluded. But in Hindu view, the Hindu view of time is also cyclical, but it should be described in individual terms as a circling in a solid cone to an infinite point where all is at rest. Time goes on repeating itself, and man is born and reborn, uh, spiraling up until he comes to that point of stillness, which we know as moksha, and that born and reborn is a reincarnation, process of reincarnation, which is released from the cycles of rebirth or births. The psychology of reception, becoming versus being. Aristotelian poetics focuses on becoming. Catharsis denotes auditors' emotional reactions to event on the stage. Since pity and fear are not the emotions of the dramatic characters themselves, but auditors' response to what becomes of them. The former necessarily directs auditors' attention from the past to the future. Thus, it tends to invite further thoughts or action. But in poetics or rasa, by comparison, an analysis of rasa theory suggests another subject for narrative discourse, a concern with being rather than becoming. In the latter, at rest in the present experience of the aesthetic mood. In this state, one experiences the nature of consciousness itself rather than of the object. And to achieve this consciousness, they need to go beyond their ego, which we discuss now. The role of the ego, fate, which is detachment. Aristotelian ego involvement. Aristotelian tragedy heightens awareness of the limitations of the empirical ego. However, such drama also shows that in these very limitations we face the same fate. Hence, it moves auditors towards universal or public knowledge and away from a view of themselves as unique, isolated beings. But in Indian rasa, first we have seen rasa can be known only if auditors abandon a self of themselves as empirical egos. They need to go beyond their self, which is egoless detachment to truly experience the play and the emotions of it. But it does so by shifting their attention from the empirical ego to the pure awareness of the comparative self within all people. The theoretical synthesis, the aesthetics of purification. Despite their opposing methods, both traditions share a profound psychological and spiritual teleology. Aristotelian tragedy and the poetics of rasa share in common the urge to arouse in auditors a unifying knowledge of the human condition, which they do not find in everyday life. Drama thus liberates man from the passivity of blind feelings and also from his self isolation and gives him a taste of his essential self that is active and lucid in knowledge and is social. There are some emotions that are latent in us, but we do not express them every day. And the work of drama is to make them feel. This is purifactory action of art as the mind is purified of its egotistic, pragmatic attachment to the world. These impurities veil the mind from its essential nature, which is contemplative, joyous, and free. We are inborn contemplative, joyous, and free, but when we experience world, we become something else, and we need to uh, put aside our ego to truly experience the emotions conveyed by the drama. Conclusion, the final resolution. The final resolution is that we are not required to choose the one or exclude the other definition. Each has its own integrity and validity. Understanding each on its own terms offer us the key to an appreciation of the treasures of both dramatic traditions. This is the infographics. These are my references. Thank you. If anyone has any question.
My question is, does the actor on stage experience rasa alongside the audience?
In both traditions, the author should, the actor should convey to truly convey the message of the drama or the emotion. The actor should act accordingly. But in the Sanskrit tradition, we need to go beyond just rather than acting or imitation. There is one concept in Sanskrit tradition, that the concept of sa-hridaya. So you have to be involved in the action itself to let your audience feel that too. So yes, the actor should also feel the same. Another question.
So my question is, can Aristotelian catharsis occur in a play that lacks a central conflict?
If there is no central conflict or in drama or in Aristotelian drama, we cannot find anything like catharsis, because as Aristotle says in his Poetics, that plot is the soul of the play. So what is plot is the soul of the play, and without that plot that has a certain kind of resolution or certain kind of conflict in each, we cannot experience catharsis. To experience pity and feeling of fear, we need to have some diversified emotions to feel these type of emotions and truly feel the catharsis. Thank you, everyone.
By the time the next one gets ready, let me share this screen, and I'm sharing this screen to update this page, website that we have, where all the students' webinar, seminar presentations, digital portfolios of all these years, PhD coursework, and different batches. Here, 25-27 batch, second season that you are giving. So this is also we are updating. So the record can be maintained, all these presentations. And first 3 days we have, and today the fourth day things also. And we are doing it live, so you can also start working on your digital portfolio from this vacation as we suggested. Then if you'll do daily, then it won't be a burden. But if you will wait for some day to come, and then it won't be possible. While the things are going on in this way, every day if you update, it takes 5 to 10 minutes only. And all the work is very well found there. Otherwise, it will be problematic. Once it is there, editing is not a difficult task. But you will have to do it while other works are being done. And you have to publish. Once the things are done, you keep on doing. So then digital portfolio is not a burden. But if you wait that I will do it afterwards, I will get some time afterwards, then you are not going to get time. There won't be time at all at the end of the semester, and then lots of things will be there, and you won't be able to do it in a proper manner. So this way you can keep on updating your digital portfolios also.
Hello everyone, myself Mansi Makwana, and today I am going to present on figurative language and the problem of interpretation, a comparative study of I.A. Richard's practical criticism and Max Black's interaction theory of metaphor. These are my academic and presentation details, table of content. My research question asked that how do the theories of I.A. Richards and Max Black explain the interpretation of figurative language, and how far do they address the problem of ambiguity and multiple meanings in the literary text. This study hypothesizes on figurative language does not yield a single fixed meaning, rather its interpretation is shaped by both the reader's psychological response as proposed by I.A. Richards and the interaction of conceptual domains within a metaphor itself, as explained by Max Black, thereby making meaning inherently dynamic, context dependent, and open to multiple interpretations. This study focuses on the theoretical perspective of I.A. Richards and Max Black to understand how figurative language is interpreted. I.A. Richards, in Practical Criticism, emphasizes that the role of reader in constructing meaning, while interpretation depends on psychological response, personal context, and engagement with the text. While on the other hand, Max Black's interaction theory explain metaphor as arising from the interaction between two conceptual domains, which making meanings dynamic rather than fixed. By comparing both approaches, this study shows that figurative language does not have a single fixed meaning but produce multiple interpretations shaped by reader response and conceptual interaction. How they both explain the figurative language. Figurative language goes beyond literal meaning. Also, it includes metaphor, symbolism, and other non-literal expressions, which often results in ambiguity in multiple interpretations. IA Richards focuses on reader-centered meaning, and its interpretation depends on the reader's psychological response. Meaning is shaped by context and individual perceptions, while Max Black's proposes interaction theory of metaphor. Meaning emerge through interaction between two conceptual domains, which emphasizes dynamic and relation nature of metaphysical meaning. Figurative language in literature. Figurative language refers to the use of expressive and imaginative forms of language that convey meanings indirectly rather than stating them explicitly. It includes devices such as metaphor, symbolism, and irony, which depend on comparison, association, and conceptual understanding rather than literal definition. Figurative expressions often create layered meanings, making interpretation flexible and open to multiple possibilities depending on the reader's perspective. A problem of interpretation and ambiguity. Figurative language often leads to the problem of interaction between it does not convey a single fixed meaning. Instead, expressions such as metaphor and symbolism are inherently ambiguous and can generate multiple interpretations depending on context, reader background, and perspective. This makes understanding literary text a complex process, and as different readers may arrive at a different meaning from the same expression. I.A. Richards emphasizes that ambiguity arises because meaning is constructed through the reader's psychological response and engagement with the text. Similarly, Black explains that the metaphor produces meaning through the interaction between conceptual domains, allowing for dynamic and flexible interpretations. I.A. Richards' practical criticism. Richards argues that meaning is not fixed within the text itself but is shaped by the reader's psychological and emotional responses, making interpretation a subjective process influenced by individual experience, background, and perception. As noted by Brooks, different readers often arrive at different interpretations of the same figurative expression, especially when authorial information is absent, highlighting the variability and uncertainty involved in literary interpretation. Richard's approach draws attention to common interpretive problems such as ambiguity, misreading, and reliance on preconceived notions, which can affect how readers understand figurative language. Black's view on metaphor and meaning. Black's interaction theory of metaphor argues that metaphor is not merely decorative language but a fundamental process for generating meaning, where a metaphor consists of primarily subject and a secondary frame that interact to produce a new and emergent understanding. Black also rejects the idea that metaphors can be fully reduced to literal paraphrases, emphasizing that metaphorical meaning is richer and cannot be completely translated into direct language. Thus, metaphor functions as a cognitive tool that enables readers to understand abstract ideas through more familiar concepts, also highlighting its role as a creative and interpretive process. In this slide, I put both the critics I.A. Richards and Max Black's concepts and key idea. Reader response focuses on the reader's subjective role, while conceptual interaction focuses on the internal structure of metaphor, and together they show that figurative language produces dynamic, context-dependent, and multiple interpretations. In this table, I discuss the core idea of I.A. Richards and Max Black's on the figurative language. I.A. Richards' theory, which emphasizes the role of reader in interpreting text, while on the other hand, Black's theory emphasizes the internal structure and interaction within metaphors. The hypothesis is justified by the theoretical perspectives of I.A. Richards and Max Black, both of whom demonstrate that figurative language does not produce a single fixed meaning, but instead allows for multiple interpretations. Richards emphasizes that meaning is constructed, but instead allows for multiple interpretation. Richards emphasizes that meaning is constructed through the reader's psychological and emotional response, making interpretation subjective and dependent on individual experience. While Black explained that metaphor generates meaning through the interaction between two conceptual domains, where features of one domain are projected onto another. Together, these approaches show that meaning in figurative language is dynamic, context dependent, and emergent, thereby supporting the hypothesis that interpretation varies and cannot be reduced to a single definitive understanding. In conclusion, this study demonstrates that figurative language does not carry a single fixed meaning, but instead generates multiple interpretations depending on both the reader response and the structure of the metaphor itself. The perspective of I.A. Richards highlights the role of the reader in constructing meaning through psychological and conceptual engagement, while Black explained how meaning emerges through the interaction between conceptual domain within a metaphor. These are my learning outcomes throughout this presentation. These are references. Now questions are welcome.
My question is, what factors influence the interpretation of literary texts?
I think the interpretation of literary texts is influenced by factors such as human's personal experience, knowledge, cultural background, and emotions, and also context in which we read the text. Anyone else?
My question is, why is the interpretation of figurative language considered subjective and context dependent?
Figurative language is subjective and context dependent because its meaning has not fixed, and it depends on the reader's experience, understanding, and the situation in which it is used. According to I.A. Richards, the meaning is created by a reader's response. On the other hand, um, Black claim that the meaning is emerged from metaphors. For example, the phrase "time is a thief" can be interpreted in the separate ways, such as it stills response. It is understood as time taking away youth and memories. So, thank you. This is from my side.
Good afternoon, everyone. So today my presentation topic is figurative language and the interpretation of meaning in the practical criticism of I.A. Richards. So these are my academic details, a table of content. So now we start from the introduction. I.A. Richards played a crucial role in the shaping modern literary criticism through his method of the practical criticism. In the practical criticism, Richards emphasized the importance of the analyzing the language of the literary text in order to understand the how meaning is produced. His approach focused on the close reading, encouraging a reader to examine the complexity of the language, tone, and imagery without relying heavily on the external context. Within the framework, the figurative language becomes the central of interpretation because their literary meaning of emerges through the metaphor, symbolism, and other indirect form of the expression. This presentation explores how the figurative language function as a key tool in the interpretation of meaning within Richard's method of the practical criticism. So my research question is, how does I.A. Richard explain the role of figurative language in the interpretation of literary meaning? In what ways does the practical criticism emphasize a close analysis of the language for the understanding literary text? How do the metaphor and the other form of the figurative expression contribute to the complexity of meaning in the literature? How have later critics interpreted or the reconsidered Richard's approach to language and interpretation? Hypothesis of my presentation is figurative language function as a central mechanism for the producing meaning in the literary text. In the method of practical criticism developed by I.A. Richard, close reading of the metaphor, tone, and the imagery enables reader to understand the multiple layers of the meaning in the literature. Therefore, careful analysis of the figurative language is essential for the achieving a balance and the accurate interpretation of the literary work. So now we discuss concept of the practical criticism. So this is the infograph of the concept of practical criticism. I.A. Richards developed a practical criticism as a method of examining how the reader interprets the literary text through the careful attention to the language. So he conducted a experiment in his classroom. Students were asked to analyze the poem without the information about the author or the historical context, revealing a common interpretative difficulties and the misunderstanding. The purpose of this method was not only to evaluate poem but also train the reader to recognize the how meaning emerges from the linguistic structure such as a tone, imagery, and the figurative language. Joseph North argues that the Richards approach treated close reading as a form of the intellectual and the aesthetic education, aimed to at improving the reader's interpretative abilities rather than the simply judging literary values. Similarly, Geoffrey H. Hartman notes that the practical criticism helped the institutionalized close reading as a central technique of the modern literary studies, emphasizing the analysis of the language within the text. Now we discuss the theory of the meaning and the figurative language. So, theory of meaning and figurative language. I.A. Richards argued that the meaning in the language is not fixed, but emerges through the interaction between the words, context, and the reader's interpretation. Here we can see that here is the four aspects of the meaning. So, first is the sense, second is feeling, tone, and intention. Figurative language plays a crucial role because of the literary meaning often develops through the metaphor, imagery, symbolic expression rather than through the literal statement. Richard also introduced the concept of the tenor and vehicle to explain how the metaphor function through the interaction between the two ideas. Manuel Bilski emphasized that the Richard's but the fundamental mechanism for producing meaning in the language. Now we discuss the close reading and the interpretation. In the method of the practical criticism, I. Richard emphasized that the close reading as the way to understand how the meaning emerges from the structure and the language of a text. By the examining reader's response to the poem, Richard demonstrated that misinterpretation often occurs when the reader fails to attend carefully to linguistic and the contextual relationship within the text. Close reading therefore requires the detailed analysis of the tone, imagery, metaphor, and the other figurative elements that shape the meaning of the literary works. Bennett notes that the Richards method encouraged reader to the move beyond the personal impressions and develop the more disciplined and the analytical form of the interpretation. Similarly, Joseph North argues that the Richard originally conceived close reading as a training in the interpretative judgment, helping readers understanding how the literary language function in the complex way. Here is a different perspective of the different critics. So first is the Bennett. His key argument is revisited Richard's classroom experiment and showed that the practical criticism reveals the common interpretative difficulties readers face when they analyzing the poetry. Bilski argues that the emphasizing the Richard's theory of the metaphor, arguing that the figurative language is not decorative but the central to the creation of the meaning in the literary text. Hartman argues that the explain the historical development of the practical criticism and its role in the establishing close reading as a major method in the literary studies. North argues that that the Richard originally used the close to reading for the educational and the interpretative training. Through the later critics transfer into a more text-centered approach. Now we discuss figurative language as a tool of meaning. I.A. Richards argues that the literary meaning often emerges through the figurative language rather than the literary expression, making a metaphor central to the interpretation. Richard explains that the metaphor through the interaction of the tenor and vehicle, where the meaning develops from the relationship between the two ideas rather than from a single literal statement. This perspective shows that the figurative language enables the reader to understand the complex emotional and intellectual meaning within the literary text. Manuel Bilski emphasized that the metaphor in the Richard's theory function as a fundamental mechanism of the communication, not simply decorative element. Through the method of close reading, practical criticism encouraged the reader to analyze the metaphor, imagery, and tone, allowing a deeper interpretation of the literary meaning. This is a complete infograph of this entire presentation. Now we discuss conclusion. The study demonstrated that the figurative language plays a crucial role in the interpretation of the literary meaning, confirming the central assumption of the research. I.A. Richards shows that the literary interpretation requires attention to the interaction of the sense, feeling, tone, and intention, which together shape the meaning of the text. His theory of the metaphor further explained that the meaning develops through the interaction between the tenor and vehicle, demonstrating that how the figurative language produce complex layers of the meaning. The method of the practical criticism therefore highlights the importance of the close reading and the careful analysis of the language in the literary interpretation. Later scholars such as Kenneth C. Bennett, Manuel Bilski, Geoffrey H. Hartman, and Joseph North further demonstrate that the Richards approach remained the influential in the understanding of the figurative language shape meaning in the literature. These are the references, and now all free to ask questions.
My question to you, why does Joseph North consider Richard's close reading as a form of interpretive training rather than just literary analysis?
Joseph North argues that the method of interpretative training rather than just the literary analysis, interpretative training because it is it's reprograms how the reader thinks. It's a skill over the result, and unlike the standard analysis in which it seeks for only and only the main meaning of the main text, but the close reading refers to in which it's like a pedagogical tool which helps to sharpen reader's mind. Second question.
My question is, how does I.A. Richards' concept of close reading differ from ordinary reading practices?
I.A. Richards' close reading different from standard reading because of standard reading seeks for only and only contextual meaning. It's casual and subjective, but close reading is focus on words, tone, and imagery in the original text. It's connect these three things and try to emerge meaning from the original text rather than only depends on outside knowledge like the biographical tracts and you can say that it's not depending on other sources rather than the original text. And close reading differs from the ordinary reading because of close reading uh, focuses on not only the feelings of the reader, but it's also focus on only and only meaning that appears in the original text. And also it's uh, it focuses on the linguistic structure rather than other things and outside knowledge. Thank you. This is from my side.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chauhan Siddharth. My presentation topic is the antinomy of literary judgment, I. Richards, and the critical shift. The personal details and academic details, table of contents, introduction. Richards' practical criticism aims to transform literary study by the introducing new method. First, he uh, document how student actually read text, common errors. He develops technique to help readers understand their response. Uh, he educational reform to improve reading skill. He argues that misreading is not due to lack of intelligence, but due to cultural habit and preconceived ideas. Criticism become a tool for better understanding. Research question and hypothesis. Research question: how do subjective blind spots and internal neutral state prevent a reader from accurately perceiving the literal sense of, and tone of a poem? Does the modern focus on concrete imagery act as a new barrier to understanding a poem logical argument? Hypothesis: authentic literary judgment is only possible when a reader identify and superiors their stock response by doing so they can engage with a poetry of in, inclus- inclusion that is complex through so mandate and invulnerable to irony. Uh, Theoretical framework: the semantic triangle. Richard's statement triangle explain how meaning is formed through the relationship between symbol through and referent. There is no direct connection between word and objects. Meaning depend on mental interpretation, misreading When this relationship is misunderstood, Richards also dis- distinguishes between scientific statement and poetical pseudo statement, which express emotion rather than fact. This framework shows that meaning is psychological and interpretive, not fixed. The fourfold meaning of language. First, sense statement of affairs, feeling, attitude toward the items, tone, attitude to his listener, intention, aims. Richard's meaning is not single but constitute of four elements: sense, feeling, tones, and intention. Sense refer to literary meaning. Uh, Feeling reflect emotional attitude. Tone shows the speaker's relation to the audience, and intention represent purpose. Methodology, the protocol analysis. Richards used an external method where he gave student anonymous poem without context. Their response called protocols were analyzed to understand reading behavior. This method remove bias related to author reputation. The aims was to move student from guesswork to analytical reading skill. It revealed how reader often misunderstanding text due to and lack of critical training. The standard of inclusion and exclusion. Richards between two type of poetry: poetry of exclusion, simplify meaning by avoid complexity, will poetry of inclusion integrates uh, conflict idea into unified structure. Poetry is richer and more resistant to irony because it already contains multiple perspective. This helps defines standard of good literature and encourage readers to appreciate complexity rather than simplicity. Scholar perspective, Bennett's 50 years follow-up. Bennett study so that although student tests have changed over time, their reading skill have not improved significantly. Modern reader often focus too much on imagery and ignorance logical meaning. This imagery fetish becomes a new barrier to understanding poetry. This study include that despite change in terminology, the same reading problem across generation. Discussion criticism as civic tools. That literary criticism has a social importance. It help individuals resist propaganda and mass manipulation by developing critical thinking skill. Poetry also contribute to psychological balance by organizing emotion. Literary critic retain Richards focus on context, emphasizing how meaning depend on the relationship between words. Criticism become not just academic but socially valuable. Conclusion, Richard saw that reading is an active and complex process. It requires awareness of personal and cultural influence. His work provide tools to achieve a more objective and balanced interpretation of literary, though through psychological or formal approaches, the goal remains the same: to understanding how language create meaning, practical criticism remains essential in n- navigate today complex and informed rich world. This is my infographic presentation recording the mind's eyes, eye Richards, and the anatomy of literary judgment. The fourfold meaning, sense, feeling, tones, and intention. The sentimental triangle. The stand of great art, execution, and inclusion. This is my references. Thank you. Any question?
My question to you: in what ways do stock responses hinder objective literary interpretation according to Richards?
The stock responses are habitual emotional reactions shaped by cultural experience that genius understanding the prevent reader from engage critical with text actual meaning with and tone. Richards argued that overcoming this is response is essential valid literary judgment. From example, a reader may uh, autonomically admire sentimental poetry without critical examining its structure or depth.
So my question is, how does the fourfold meaning of the language contribute to a comprehensive understanding of literary text?
The four-folding meanings, sense, feeling, tones, intention, all function simultaneously. This model allows critic to analyze for intellectual and emotional dimension of language in ensure uh, more holistic interpretation of literary works. For example, in a poem, literally meaning may describe an event, while tone, feeling, reveal irony or beneath the surface. Thank you from my side.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today's my presentation topic is the resonant tender, a comparative study of I.A. Richards' mechanics of metaphor and classical Indian Dhwani theory in social media and mime culture. Here is my academic and presentation details. Here is table of content. My research question is how can Richard's theory of metaphor and classical Indian Dhwani aesthetic be integrated to explain the progresses of meaning making in a contemporary social media and mime culture? In what way do digital mimes function as a site of metaphysical interactions and suggestive meaning where interpretations emerge through user participations, cultural context, and network circulations hypothesis. These studies argue that meaning in a contemporary mime culture is not fixed or inherently embedded with digital content, but emerges through the dynamic interactions of metaphor and suggestions. By bringing together I. Richard's concept of tender and vehicle and the Dhvani principle of Vyanchana, it demonstrates that mimes operates as a hybrid interactive system where meaning as generated through cognitive engagement, cultural context, and implicit resonance. Introductions. This presentation explore how meaning is constructed in a digital environment by comparing I. Richard's theory of metaphor with the classical Indian concept of dhvani to understand interpretations in a social media and mime culture. It argued that meaning in online communication is not fixed but emerged through suggestions, user interactions, and network circulations where audience actively participate in a shaping interpretations. Mime culture is used as the cultural side of analysis because it rises on shared cultural knowledge and textual inherence rather than direct or literal meaning. Digital cultural and meaning producations. Digital cultural work as a decentralized system where meaning is not controlled by a single author but it is continuously created and shaped by users across a platform. Today's audience are not just consumer but active participants who help produce and modify meaning. Digital platforms allow content to spread, remix, and involve which challenges and idea of fixed authorship. I. Richards and mechanics of metaphor. I. Richards define a metaphor as interactions between a tender and vehicle, where meaning arrives dynamically through their relationship rather than existing as a fixed property of language. Meaning is understood as an active progress shaped by the reader's engagement rather than passive decoding of fixed textual content. Dhvani theory and suggestive meaning. Dhvani theory means that the real meaning is not directly said; it is only hinted, and readers has to understand the deeper meaning by thinking and connecting it with context. The concept of Vanjana explain the suggestive capacity of language that operates beyond a literal semantic structure and enables layered meaning. Dhvani work well only when the readers understand the context and the cultural because they need to actively think and interpret the deeper meaning. Connections between metaphor and dhvani. Both Richard's metaphor theory and dhvani aesthetics converge on the idea that meaning is not contained within a language itself, but emerges through interpretive interactions between a text and reader. Metaphor is grounded and embodies cognitions where thought is structured through bodily and experiential system rather than abstract linguistic forms. Uh, Resonant tender as a concept. The concept of resonant tender refers to a form of meaning making in which the tender of metaphor is not fixed but explained through layers and suggestion, cultural context, and audience interpretations, expanding the interactive model of metaphor produced by Richards. In a digital environment, the resonance of intensified through circulations, remixing, and participatory engagement, where users actively reshape and extend a meaning across a network. uh, Mimes as a metaphorical structure. Mimes function as a metaphorical structure in which meaning is produced through the interactions between a visible image or a format and an amplified conceptual idea closely resembling Richard's model of tender and vehicle. The the visual component of the mime often act as the vehicle, while the cultural of or political meaning it conveys operates as a tender, creating layers interpretations through their interactions. Mimes as a dhvani. Mimes fiction as a system of suggesting in which meaning is not amplified, stated, but amplified through context, cultural references, and shared understanding, closely aligning with the principles of dhvani in a classical Indian aesthetic. Therefore, mime can be understood as a modern digital form of dhvani, where the meaning is activated through resonance between content and audience interpretation. Here is a infography is explained mime as a resonant tender. Social media and trend formations. Social media trend emerges through interactions between collective participation and influential notes that shape the visibility and circulations of content. Uh, as a result, trends are socially constructed phenomena shaped by the combined forces of hierarchy and participatory engagement. Resonant tender framework. The resonant tender framework interrogates Richard's metaphor theory and dhvani aesthetic to explain a meaning as a dynamic interactions between implicit experience and implicit suggestions. This framework provide a unified theoretical lens for understanding meaning across both a classical literary tradition and a contemporary digital system. Conclusion: both Richard's metaphor theory and Dhvani aesthetic shows that meaning is not fixed in language but emerges through interpretations. In digital mime culture, the progresses become more dynamic as a meaning is continuously reshaped through participation, circulations, and remixing. As a result, digital cultural function as a resonant space where meaning is co-created, fluid, and constantly involving. Here is my learning outcomes, references. Thank you. Do you have anyone any question?
Can meme be misunderstood? How does your theory explain that?
Yes, mime can be misunderstood because its meaning is not a direct. It depends on a person understand that their culture and background. For example, mime in using mime using in movies funny scenes. It depends on people that who is seeing these scenes. But some peoples are not seeing a movie, so they not understand this it at all.
So my question is, how do memes relate to Dhoni theory?
I'm related to Dhani theory because both rely on suggested meaning rather than direct explanations. The real meaning is not stated openly. It understood by the audience through cultural knowledge, context, and interpretation. Thank you.
This is my academic information. This is table of contents. So my research question focuses on how can IA Richard's concept of stock responses in practical criticism be reinterpreted as digital sanskaras within the algorithmically mediated and affect-driven context of contemporary Indian social media, and what does this reveal about the changing epistemology of misreading? My hypothesis is this study argues that I.R. Richard's stock responses evolve into digital sanskaras in contemporary Indian digital culture where figurative language is interpreted through algorithmic reinforcement, cultural conditioning, and affective circulation, transforming misreading into a systemic and a productive mode of meaning making rather than an interpretive error. Introduction. I. Richards in practical criticism fundamentally destabilize the assumption of that meaning is inherent in literary text by demonstrating through control classroom experiments that reader consistently produce divergent and often erroneous interpretation when deprived of contextual cues, thereby revealing that reading is psychologically mediated and epistemologically unstable process rather than an objectively act of comprehension. His identification of interpretive failures, particularly in relation to figurative language, establishes that misreading is not an anomaly but a structural condition of reading shaped by emotional predispositions, cultural conditioning, and associative thinking patterns. This presentation argues that Richard's concept of stock responses must be theorized as a digital sanskaras, marking a shift from individual interpretive habits to culturally embedded and algorithmically reinforced patterns of collective misreading. Richard's epistemology. Richard's analytical frameworks reveals that meaning is not a stable property of the text, but an emergent phenomenon produced through the interaction between linguistic structure and reader cognition, thereby positioning misreading as an inevitable outcome of interpretive engagement rather than a deviation from it. his categorization of interpretive errors, including stock responses and mnemonic irrelevance, demonstrates that readers frequently imposes externally derived associations and emotional reaction and ideological assumption onto text, thereby displacing textual meaning with subjective projections. This insight anticipates contemporary conditions where digital users similarly interpret memes, slogans, and figurative expressions through preconditioned framework, conferring that misreading is fundamentally epistemological, not incidental. Conceptual transition from stock responses to digital sanskaras. The transformation from Richard's stock responses to digital sanskaras signifies a critical shift from individual cognitive habits to collectively reinforced interpretive structures shaped by digital environments and cultural repetition. In Indian social media context, uh, interpretive behavior is conditioned by two fact cultural narrative and a platform driven repetition. For example, a metaphor embedded in a political meme may be immediately interpreted through nationalistic sentiment and ideological alignment without critical engagement with its figurative complexity. Figurative language in digital memes aesthetics. Richards emphasized that figurative language, particularly metaphor and irony, requires disciplined interpretive attention, without which meaning collapses into ambiguity or distortion, a condition that becomes significantly intensified within digital meme culture. Memes function as compressed semiotic units, combining visual and textual elements to produce layered meanings that rely heavily on shared cultural codes and contextual knowledge. This reflects Richard's observation that interpretive competition is unevenly distributed, but in digital culture, the absence of context and the speed of circulation transform such misreading into mass phenomena rather than isolated errors. This image shows memes carry compressed cultural meaning that can easily be misread and creating mass misinterpretation in digital spaces. Next is algorithmic mediation, the reconfirming of context. Um, while Richards deliberately removed context to expose interpretive instability, contemporary digital platform reconstruct context through algorithmic curation, thereby shaping not only what users read but how they interpret it. Algorithms prioritize emotionally engaging content and repetitive patterns aligned with user behavior. For example, a sarcastic or ironic post may be algorithmically amplified among audiences and predisposed to interpret it literally, resulting in systematic misreading reinforced by digital visibility. Thus, meaning becomes a function of algorithmic circulation rather than textual integrity. Next is affective economies and emotion as a interpretive framework. This slide shows that how emotional engagement dominates interpretation on digital platforms. Misreading becomes an emotionally reinforced collective phenomenon rather than an isolated error. Indian digital culture, vernacularity, and interpretive fragmentation. Uh, this slide highlights linguistic hybridity and culturally specific symbols that complicated interpretation. It reveals how vernacularity and ideology produce interpretive fragmentation. Uh, this is the infograph of my whole presentation. Conclusion. This study demonstrates that I. Richards' theory of misreading retains profound relevance in the contemporary digital age, where the conditions he identify have been intensified, expanded, and systematized through algorithmic and cultural processes, and demonstrate the misreading is systematic, collective, and embedded in algorithmically mediated, affect-driven digital culture. Proposes a redefined framework for digital critical reading. Here is my justification of research question and hypothesis. The present study is justified by the enduring theoretical significance of I.A. Richards' practical criticism, which establishes that misreading is not an accidental failure but a structural and epistemological condition of interpretation shaped by psychological predispositions and cultural conditioning and affective responses, thereby necessitating its re-examination within a contemporary context where interpretive practices have undergone profound transformation. Here is my learning outcomes. These are the references. Now questions are welcome.
So my question is, how does your study extend Richard's theory?
I.A. Richards analyzed misreading and stock responses in literary texts, emphasizing emotional and cognitive tendencies of readers. And my presentation extends this to digital culture, showing how algorithms structurally shape affective responses, creating reproducible patterns of collective misreading and emotional amplification and Indian social media. Thus, situation is his literary framework in contemporary technological context. Next question.
How does digital sanskaras differ from traditional culture or social conditioning?
So traditional sanskaras develop gradually through lived experience and social practices, and digital sanskaras, by contrast, are accelerated and algorithmically reinforced and highly repeatable. For example, during the 2026 Kerala floods, a viral video exaggerated the extent of the damage, causing mass panic and rapid sharing on Twitter and WhatsApp before verification. This shows how social media creates instant pattern emotional responses across millions, unlike traditional sanskaras, which form slowly over time. Thank you. That's all from my side.
Hello everyone, myself Kruti Vyas, and today I'm going to present my topic on the grammar story, archetypes, metaphor and aesthetic architecture of the Lion King. This is my academic details and presentation details. This is a table of content which I will discuss today. So my research question is, how do the theory of Northrop Frye and I. Richards help us understand why the Lion King works as a powerful and meaningful story? My hypothesis is that the figurative language and archetypal structure used in The Lion King, especially its light and darkness imagery, the metaphor of circle of the life, and the line specifically remember who you are, work together as the primary reason the film creates such a strong moral and emotional impact on the audience, going far beyond what the plot alone can achieve. So, why this looks new to the audience? So you might wonder why I am applying serious literary theory to a Disney movie today. So the answer is that the Lion King carries the exact same literary weight as a classic literature. By using Northrop Frye's, we can uncover its ancient mythic roots, and by using I.A. Richards, we can see how its visual and spoken language builds deep emotions. And together, these theories prove this film belongs to the in our canonical academic discussion. The grammar of the story, core argument, and the title explain. So this brings me to my core argument that which I call the grammar of the story. Just like language has rules, storytelling has rules. Northrop Frye gives us a structural grammar, how stories are built from the ground up, and I.A. Richards provides the linguistic grammar, how words and images actually create meaning, and together they explain why this film resonates so deeply across this generation. So first introduction, let's briefly examine the two theoretical lenses I used for this analysis. So first, Northrop Frye looks at the archetypal universal pattern that he divides into four mythoi or season like comedy, tragedy, etc. And the second one is I.A. Richards. He looks at the figurative language. He explains how an image, which he calls the vehicle, carries an underlying idea, which he calls a tenor. He also details how language delivers in four distinct types of meaning. First, sense. Second, feeling. Third, tone. And last is intention. And this is a Northrop Frye's archetypal criticism. So, looking deeper at the Frye's four mythoi, he argues that literature is not just a random collection of events, but it recycles ancient pattern rooted deep in human psychology as well. Spring represent like comedy, autumn represent like tragedy, and so forth. So, the question I asked was that where exactly does the Lion King fit into this cycle? So the Lion King as a comedy cycle. How? So my presentation shows it map perfectly to the Fry's comedy cycle. It following is four distinct step. First, we see order, which establishes at Pride Rock. Second is a displacement, which occurs when Simba is exiled. Third is a wandering. It represents by his Hakuna Matata phase. And finally, the return, when he reclaimed the throne and restored society to equilibrium. And the mythic structure in the Lion King. So if we look closely at this mythic geography, here Pride Rock is not just a physical setting. It functions as a sacred center of the world. Because Scars creates a tragic wasteland, but Simba's eventual return, it embodies the classical comedic restoration, bringing back the rain and restoring moral order to the sacred center. The Hamlet parallel. So to prove that these archetypes are truly universal, so I compared the film to Shakespeare's Hamlet, because you will notice that they said the exact same grammar, and the murder king, the usurping uncles and exiled prince, and the loyal companions as well. So the main difference is simply we can see the resolution, while Hamlet ends in tragedy, but here the Lion King completes the comedy cycle. I.A. Richards and his figurative language. Now switch to I.A. Richards' practical criticism, because we learn to look for a tenor and hidden concept and the vehicle, the image carrying it. So Richard here also break down any alterness into four meanings: sense, feeling, tone, and intention. Let's apply this linguistic grammar directly to the film. Four kind of meanings. To take the famous line, "Remember who you are," spoken by Mufasa goes to Simba. So the sense is literal. Mufasa is reminding Simba that he is true king. The feeling conveys profound grief and unconditional love as well. The tone is a tender, and finally the intention is to wake Simba up from his push him toward responsibility. So here the plot alone does not make us emotional, but it is these four layers of meaning that we do. Creating emotional meaning. Expanding on this idea, the cycle of life is not merely a song, it's an expanded metaphor, a powerful vehicle which carrying us the tenor of natural and moral. Furthermore, the film visual design act as a figurative language and his style on his rights, and in which the golden lights surrounding Mufasa and the green shadow surrounding Scar immediately is yeah, immediately represent by this. And a possible objection. So, the valid academic objection to this argument might be, what if the emotions come strictly from the music and animation, not the words? So, my answer to that is that this actually strengthen Richard's theory. In a cinematic medium, Hans Zimmer's rising and animators choice act as a oral and visual metaphor. They are vehicle for meaning just as much as any spoken text. Watch each theory reveals in The Lion King. To summarize this finding, Fry shows us that structural bones of the story, the hero's journey, the dying god, and the mythic center. Meanwhile, Richard shows us that the linguistic heart of the story, the emotional coding of light, darkness, and inherited destiny as well, where the two theories meet. When we look at where these two theories meet, we see a powerful combination. Fry provides a narrative structure, other side Richards provide the linguistic and visual meaning. So when you mix this ancient mythic cycle with deep personal metaphors, you get culturally defining masterpiece. So my conclusion, to conclude, literary theory is not just for canonical books, but it lives in a popular we consume daily in our life. And The Lion King is especially endures because it perfectly executed this grammar of story. So here my hypothesis is prove that figurative language and archetypal structure do not work in isolation, but they work in partnership to create profound and emotional weight. This is my learning outcome, and this is the final summary table of my entire analysis. And this is a detailed infography of my whole presentation, and these are the references. Thank you. Questions are please welcome.
Does the absence of literal scenes in music and lighting weaken their precision as a metaphor, or does it strengthen feeling by bypassing logical filter?
So, music and lightning bypass the prison house of the language to reach the soul, the pre-reflective consciousness directly. As metaphors, they communicate is inexpressible, and with the precision that the logic and that logic define cannot replicate. Next one.
So my question is, does Simba's Hakuna Matata phase represent a necessary green world for a healing, or is it a site of moral stagnation that contradicts his hero's journey?
Okay, so Simba's here Hakuna Matata is a vital green word from for trauma recovery. Yet it risk moral stagnation by delaying dharma. So this lotus eater phase suspend his growth until supernatural intervention is come and forces him to reclaim his duty as well. So yeah, this is from my side. Thank you.
કેમને મારું નામ ગોતું છું. Hello. Okay. સ્ક્રીન શેર કરવાની છે તમારે. So hello everyone, good evening, and I'm Priyanka Nakrani, and today I'm going to present on Northrop Frye meets Netflix, archetypal pattern in Stranger Things and Game of Thrones. This is my academic and presentation details. This is table of contents. Let's focus on first introduction. Archetypal criticism examines recurring symbols, character types, and narrative patterns that structure literary meaning across text. Literature is rooted in mythic framework and universal human experience reflect a shared culture and a psychological consequences. These archetypes function as a deep structural elements shaping how stories are created, interpreted, and understood across time. Archetypal patterns extend beyond traditional literature into modern visible media and digital storytelling. So moving further, first we have to know that what are archetypes. Archetypes are recurring image, symbols, characters, narrative situations that appear across literary culture and text. They function as a universal pattern of meaning, making story recognizable across different culture and time period. Moving further, let's focus first on research question. How do contemporary television series such as Stranger Things and Game of Thrones reflect and reinterpreted classical archetypal patterns described by Northrop Frye, and to what extent do this series align with universal mythic structure outlined by Joseph Campbell? So my hypothesis is contemporary television series continue to employ tradition archetypal structure. However, they significantly modify and complicates these patterns to reflect modern culture, anxieties, and narrative complexity, supporting both and enduring relevance, the limitations of archetypal criticism. Let's focus first on a theoretical framework. Archetypal criticism. Archetypal criticism studies recurring pattern of symbol, character, narrative in literature and media. Literature is rooted in myth, shaping meaning through collective human experience. Northrop Frye argues that literature follow cyclic structure derived from myth, and archetypes create a connection between text, forming and shared system of meaning. Joseph Campbell's introduced that hero's journey, departure, પછી initiation and written. Let's focus on Northrop Frye's theory of archetypes. Northrop Frye argues that literature is not random but follows structured pattern. All literary work are shaped by mythical patterns and archetypal images. Like literature operates through cyclic patterns such as birth, grow, after that death, and renewal. He connects literature with seasonal cycle and myths like comedy reflects spring, romance reflects summer, and tragedy is autumn, and irony is winter. Archetypes create a share meaning system linking different work of literature. From the archetypes of literature, Frye emphasized that no text is complicated. Moving further, let's focus on archetypal criticism and research. Archetypal criticism has been widely used to analyze literary structure and a meaning. Denaliel Rice Brown argues that archetypes help reader recognize deeper symbol patterns in text. However, some critics questions its limitations. Like first is Risk argues that archetypal criticism can oversimplify complex and diverse text. and it may ignore historical and culture context in interpretations. Despite this, recent studies show its continued relevance in modern literature and media, and it is now applied not only on literature but also film and television. So first, let's see overview of Stranger Things. Stranger Things blends science fiction, horror, and coming of age element. This series is heavily influenced by 1980s nostalgia and popular culture. It's present a narrative centered on friendship, fear, and survival. This concept of upside down reflect a dark parallel reality and symbolize hidden fear. This shows uses gothic element and supernatural feature to create tension and mystery. Characters are structured around clear moral roles, and especially in earlier seasons, the narrative follows a good vs evil conflict similar to traditional myth, and psychological and emotional struggle are central to the character development. So let's see archetypal analysis of Stranger Things. First is Shadow. Shadow reflects Demogorgon upside down world, represents fear and danger and in the unknown world. Symbolize the darker reality beneath the normal world. Second is Group Allies. Mike, Dustin, Lucas reflects unity and friendship, showing collective strength. And the narrative follows a clear good vs evil structure similar to traditional myth. The story reflects universal pattern of struggle and growth central to mythic narrative. And the other series, let's see overview of Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones presents a narrative centered on power, politics, and survival. Unlike traditional stories, it portrays a moral, complex, and unpredictable world. The series challenges the idea of clear destination between good vs evil. It incorporates mythic and fantasy elements such as dragon and supernatural forces, the struggle for power, and reflects universal theme of conflict and ambitious. The story reflects a world where hero and villain are not clearly defined. The narrative structure is closer to irony and tragedy aligned with Fry's mythical phases. So let's see in Game of Thrones archetypal analysis. The series reflect the challenges archetypal patterns, showing that they are adaptable. Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen represents the hero archetypes, but their journey become morally complex, breaking the idea of stable hero. Tyrion Lannister function as a trickster, using intelligence and wit while maintaining balance within the narrative. The shadow archetypes appear through the White Walkers and human ambitions representing chaos and destruction. Unlike the traditional narratives, a series remove the clear boundary between hero and villain, creating ambiguity. The narrator aligned with irony and tragedy, with which Fries associate with the darker mythical phase. Let's compare with two series angle of some of aspects. First is archetypal structure. In Stranger Things follow a stable archetype pattern. In the Game of Thrones show unstable and reshaped archetype. Hero aspect, another aspect is hero's archetype. 11 as a central hero showing growth, and the other side multiple heroes with conflicting identity. Third is moral framework. In Stranger Things, clear vs good structure, evil structure, and other side morality and ambiguity. Hero's journey follows a departure, institution, and a return. In the other side, descriptive journey with the tragic outcomes, and other is character roles, narrative styles, and use of archetypes. Let's see relevance of archetype criticism now. Archetypal criticism continue to be relevant in analyze modern media and storytelling. Contemporary series like Stranger Things and Game of Thrones shows the continued use of universal pattern. Other is this series demonstrate how mythic structure are adapt to moral culture context, and archetypal helps audience connect emotionally with the characters and narrative across time. An archetypal analysis of Game of Thrones, the series reflects the challenges archetypal patterns, showing that they are adaptable. Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen represents the hero of archetypes, but their journey become morally complex, as we see earlier. So let's moving further, focus on conclusion. From my presentation,
Both Stranger Things and Game of Thrones reflects archetypal patterns identified the North of Fries, and Stranger Things perceives traditional archetypes follow clear narrative structure, and Game of Thrones challenges redefined archetypes, introducing complexity and ambiguity. This comparison supports the idea that archetypes are both continuous and evolving. Modern storytelling does not embed in myth and reinterpretation its contemporary audience, and archetypal criticism remains in initials for understanding to connect between classical and modern narrative. So in learning outcome, I have understood the concept of archetypal criticism and its application in literary and media study, and analyzed how myth and universal patterns shaped narrative across different time period, and applied North of Fry theory to the modern television series like Game of Thrones and Stranger Things, and identified key archetypes such as hero, mentor, shadow, and contemporary narratives. So these are the works cited. So if anyone has any question, feel free to ask.
So my question is, how does Stranger Things differ from Game of Thrones in using archetypes?
So Stranger Things follow clear and traditional archetypes similar to Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. And Game in contrast, Game of Thrones represents fluid roles where character change and making archetypes less stable and more complex. Any another questions?
My question is, if archetypes are universal, why does Game of Thrones seem to break them?
Okay. Archetypes are not rigid rules, but it's flexible patterns. North of Rye explains that literary structure can evolve, and in Game of Thrones, it does not rejects the idea of archetypes. It complicates them by adding moral ambiguity and unpredictable outcomes. So, thank you, everyone. This is from my side.
Good evening, everyone. Myself Grishma Rawal, and today the topic which I'm going to present is about the divided identity and mythic seriousness, the archetype of the double in the Vampire Diaries. These are my academic and presentation details, the table of contents. My research question asks, how does the archetype of the double function in the Vampire Diaries to represent divided identity? Hypothesis is the doppelganger motif in the Vampire Diaries functions as a modern reconfiguration of the archetype of the double, through which divided identity is not merely represented but structurally embedded within the narrative. And by drawing on archetypal patterns described by Northrop Frye and reworking them within a Gothic framework, the series produces a form of mythic seriousness that exposes identity as fluid, rational, and shaped by competing psychological and cultural forces. Coming to the introduction, the doppelganger in the Vampire Diaries and Fry's idea. The archetype is not merely a recurring motive, but a structuring principle of literary meaning, which is operating through repetition and transformation, which Lane argues. And the primordial image or archetype is a figure, whether it be a demon, man, or process, that repeats itself in the course of history wherever creative fantasy is fully manifested. As Daniel Russell Brown suggests that archetypal criticism identifies literature as a system governed by a recurring symbolic configurations rather than isolated forms. He states that much of the difficulty with mythic criticism is with myth itself, for the term is far stable in the minds and mouths of those who use it. The doppelganger emerges within this framework as a site of internal division rather than external duplication. And this representations of Catherine and Elena, the two characters of the Vampire Diaries, establishes this difference between the human and the monstrous. And in the Vampire Diaries, Elena Catherine dynamic reconfigures the double into a problem of identity where the self is constituted through its own replication and distortion. And the series thus foregrounds identity not as a unity, but as a fracture, a displacement, and structural instability. Then, coming towards the theatrical framework, the archetype of the double. In archetypal criticism, which is formulated by Northrop Frye, it conceptualizes literature as a self contained system of recurring mythic structures that generate meaning internally. So, Frye states that hence the words denoting literary structure, fable, myth, and fiction have acquired a secondary sense of untruth, like Norwegian word for poet, diter, which also means liar. Frye states that after the hero has understood their structure, then he can descend from archetypes to genres and see how the drama emerges from the ritual side genres and how the drama emerges from the ritual side. So the double here, therefore, is not an incidental motive but a structural articulation of division within identity itself. Decroot states that just as viewers are able to notice Elena's wardrobe change, I also noticed Catherine's outward appearances. Her hair seems thicker and curly, and her dresses were really provocative. Len and Brown also reinforced this by positioning the archetypes as mutable and context sensitive rather than universally fixed categories. And this double here thus operates as an intersection of mythic structure and contextual specificity, producing a tension central to its meaning. Then the divided identity in the Vampire Diaries. So identity here is not represented but constructed through processes of doubling, substitution, and repetition. Elena and Catherine do not signify two identities but rather a circulating identity that exists across differentiated embodiments. Robert Mureger interprets Frye's model as an expanding circle where meaning and by extension identity emerges relationally rather than autonomously. And this television narrative produces identity through discursive repetition, where the character is constituted through language, interaction, and narrative positioning. The success of a film or a TV series depends on the audience's recognition and acceptance, and the audience, as separate and independent individuals, are so different that their requirements can't be satisfied at the same time. One traditional trope which is used to highlight the opposition between positive and negative attitudes is the doppelganger, which is following both Jung and Freud's theories. And many scholars have discussed the idea that the double in terms of a division within the self, and it explains how it exposes an uncontrollable side of the individual, since it typically marks the uncanny double of protagonist as an aspect of his or her often connected unstable identity. Then comes the mythic seriousness and the Gothic tradition, the intervention of the both. So the Gothic mode here introduces a temporal logic of repetition, inevitability, and return, within which the double acquires ontological significance. The tropological level here is the archetypal level or the mythical level. And for Frye states that for I do not see any way of distinguishes archetype in this sense from myth. In all the kicking around that this latter term has had in current criticism, one may notice, as usual, three main types of what are generally called myths: the narrative myth, which includes creation myth, death, and resurrection myth; and the image myth, including the myth of God, or the archetypal human character, and the conceptual myth. Archetypes, as Len suggests, that they persist through continuous reinterpretation, allowing modern narratives to retain mythic resonance without losing specificity. He states that Samuel Johnson was the first literary critic to use the term archetype in its modern sense. In Vampire Diaries, Elena and Catherine, as doppelgangers, repeatedly show aspects of each other's mindset that they try to hide even from themselves. So the mythic seriousness here thus emerges as the condition in which narrative operates not as a representation but as a participation in a symbolic order of inevitability and repetition. Uh, this is the image of Elena and Catherine, and in one frame we see Elena, and in another frame we see Catherine. So here in Elena's portrait, the lighting is low, and it shows the humanistic belief of tenderness, fragility, and also emotional resonance. Whereas on the other side, we have Catherine, who looks very dominant and also very cunning, and her coy smile shows that she is very sure about what she is doing, and this shows the grimness in her character as well, and how cunning and outrageous her personality can be to deceive others. Then the doppelganger motif, Elena and Catherine. So in this dichotomy of human original versus the double fails in this instance, as it is not the evil doppelganger that arrives to haunt the protagonist, Elena, but it is the original Catherine who haunts the double. So basically they look the same, but they differ very much from each other, and the quality is that the a character is portrayed by the same person but in two different roles, so that makes the character and also the person who is portraying them more in depthful of their role. So later, in contrast between human and vampire, it is questioned further when Elena is transformed into a vampire and Catherine is the external menace that threatens the established order of the community of Mystic Falls. So in Gothic narratives, monstrosity is typically reacted through the disturbing capacity of the monster's bodies. And Elena, a human who, despite all the trauma she has experienced in her life, is still the heroine, helping others regardless of the circumstances. So, within the Vampire Diaries, however, Elena is not the original but the copy of Catherine Pierce, breaking with this tradition. So, Elena comes from the lineage from where Catherine Pierce has came, but she is not the original one, because original one is Catherine, and also not Catherine. It comes from the Petrova lineage, where we see one more character of Amara. So she can be considered as the pioneer or the original identity. So identity here is therefore questioned when the audience realizes that copy is not wholly negative, but in fact more positive characteristics are there than the original one, and she is the one audience empathizes with. And this analysis further demonstrates that femininity is constructed through contradictory expectations, producing identity as a tension rather than resolution. So Rosie Braidotti, Marino Feza is quoting her, and she states that the concept of the human has exploded under the double pressure of contemporary scientific advances and global economic concerns. This is the chart which shows the similarity and complementarity between Elena Gilbert and Catherine Pierce. So, Willing Sacrifice in season 2, hybrid named Klaus comes, and she is willingly sacrificing herself for her friends and family. But Catherine, on the other hand, is selfish, and she is avoiding this sacrifice through manipulation. So both occupy the same structural position in the ritual. The identity of Elena, because she represents the human other, so she is moral and empathetic, whereas Catherine is the vampire without humanity, so she is strategic and self-preserving self. So they are the two poles of a single divided identity. The agencies is Elena chooses selflessness, and whereas Catherine chooses survival because she is running away from Klaus from 400 years. So the similarity is they this complementarity responses to the same existential thread, like they both want to survive. The identity fluidity is stable, identity is disrupted in Elena's character, whereas Catherine performs identity, so impersonation. So at some times she is impersonating Elena, and at some times she is impersonating her own self. So this shows the duality and also the cunningness in her nature. So identity is shown as a transferable and unstable source. Then the transformation of Elena is from human to vampire, and whereas Catherine from vampire to human. So the reverse trajectories that mirror each other. The relationship dynamics, Elena is loved and protected, and Catherine is desired as well as feared by others. This central is to the same relational network, which is the character of Stephen and Demon. And the suffering and loss, the emotional and moral burden is seen more in Elena's character, whereas Catherine is of survival and loneliness and her trauma also, because she is running away from Klaus from many years. So they both are experiencing the inevitable suffering, and in ending, Elena becomes human again, and she gets peace, reunion with her lover Damon, and restoration. And whereas Catherine goes to death, destruction, and damnation, she dies in the season 5. And the different outcomes are there, but the narrative closure is same. One is having a tragic ending, and one is having a peaceful ending. So, in conclusion, this doppelganger is emerging not as a motive but as a structural condition through which identity is articulated and fractured. So, Elena and Catherine, as doppelgangers, repeatedly show the aspects of each other's mindset that try to hide even from themselves. For Elena, Catherine represents the dark aspects which she tries to deny, those aspects of the psyche with which the adult cannot be reconciled. She is the monster that haunts her dreams and reminds her of her own darkness. Because prominently, Catherine, when she entered Mystic Falls, she tried to take Elena's soul, but she failed. So, for Catherine, Elena stands as what she has lost in her right to stay alive, and she is a painful reminder of what she no longer is. It must be noted that, however, in recent postmodern fictions, the double has moved away from a consideration of the Cartesian self, which is an indivisible, unite, continuous, and fixed identity and universal absolutes, to now which explore the precise of its divisions and discontinuities in attempt to decenter the concept of the self, to view human reality as a constant. Fry's archetypal system reveals how such structures operate at a deep mythic level of literary organization. At the same time, the critique foregrounds the necessity of situating the structures within the specific cultural and narrative context. And in the Vampire Diaries, the double becomes a mechanism through which identity is continuously produced, displaced, and reconfigured. So the series here ultimately articulates identity as inherently divided structure, not by unity but by repetition, difference, and internal contradiction. This is the infograph of my presentation. The justification of my research question and hypothesis. So it is justified because the Vampire Diaries centrally organizes its narrative around the doppelganger, making the archetype, the double, not merely a thematic element but a structural device through which identity is explored and destabilized. And drawing on Northrop Frye's conceptions of literature as a system of recurring archetypal patterns, the question becomes significant in examining how such patterns persist and evolve in contemporary tradition of television. And the hypothesis is therefore valid in proposing that the doppelganger motif functions as a modern reconfiguration of the double, where identity is not simply represented as a divided but is structurally embedded through repetition, mirroring, and substitution. So, by situating this within the Gothic framework marked by recurrence, fate, and inevitability, the series produces a form of mythic seriousness that reveals identity as fluid, relational, and constituted through the internal contradictions, particularly evident in the Elena Catherine dynamic, where the sameness and differences coexist together. These are my learning outcomes, the references. Thank you. If anyone has any question, feel free to ask.
So my question is, can you apply Fry's archetypal theory to another character from the series?
Yes, there is one character of another protagonist, Stefan Salvatore, and he is transferring his character from the turning off of humanity switch to a ripper, where she is killing masses of people, which shows how psychoanalysis work of the divided self, which is mentioned in Fry's archetypal argument. And also there is one another character which resembles Stephen, named Silas, and he has turned off his humanity. He does not care about anyone but himself, and for the ritual to be performed, he is killing hundreds of people just for the sake to remain alive for next 100 years. So this shows how the character is switching between humanistic to monstrous form, showing the divided self or the doubling of the criticism present in the archetype of the divided hero by Northrop Frye. Next question.
So my question is, do you think the series ultimately resolved the tension of divided identity, or does it reinforce it?
Like I mentioned in my presentation as well, in the end, Elena is restoring to her peaceful and happily loving life with her lover, and she is transporting back into her human form from a vampire. But whereas Catherine, she was a vampire, she desired to be a human, and when she became human, she was not happy to be human, because when she became human, she knew that she is going to die very soon. So this shows that the divided identity is somewhat resolved, but the tension does not get resolved, because what Catherine desired, she did not get it, and Elena desired that thing, but she also misses her powers. So it does not totally resolve it, and we can also connect it with the postmodern theory of fragmentation, how the identity is fragmented, and how Fry's criticism of the doubling of the character is also being present in this part as well. Thank you. That is it from my side.
Hello everyone, myself Nidhi Pandya. Good evening to everyone. Today's my topic is from myth to machine, archetypal structures, interactive narratives and evolution in mythic storytelling in contemporary video games. These are my academic details and presentation details. These are table of contents. My research question is how have the archetypal structures from the traditional myths evolved into the interactive narratives within the contemporary video games, transforming passive listening into action correlation. My hypothesis is contemporary video games function as a machines that transform passive mythic storytelling into an active play driven experience, allowing all the correlation of personal myth while both preserving and challenging the traditional archetypal frameworks. My introduction is that myth are once bound communities through the shared oral performance. Now today video games perform a similar culture labor but through the interactive machinery that lets the each player inhabit the myth. This shift from the passive listening to action correlative marks a revolutionary moment in a storytelling history, one that demands we examine both and its continuity and its rupture. After that, from myth to the machine. By embedding mything structures inside the interactive system, games offer an experience impossible in books or the films. Players literally walk into hero's path, make the moral choices, and now confronts the shadows in real time. Here, this machine-mediated myth making revitalized storytelling while raising new questions about the authorship, agency, and the future of the narrative itself. The power of archetypes into the storytelling. Archetypes are not just a static symbol but living patterns that games activate throughout the play. Now players do not merely observe the wise old man or the trickster, they embody and transform them. This experimental power explain why game feels the mythic even when their stories appear simple and the formulaic. Now critiquing the hero's journey as a monomyth. Now, while Campbell's monomyth remains
influential critic rightly exposed its limitations. Why? That games, however, can correct these flaws by letting the players inhabit the marginalized archetypes or the experience collective rather than the solitary heroism. This critique opens space for the richer and a more inclusive mythic storytelling in a digital form. Jungian archetypes and their essence into the games. Now, Jungian archetypes gain new life inside the games where the players literally enact with the shadow, enemy, or the hero. The dialectical tension here Mills described becomes a visible into the gameplay decisions that force confrontation with the otherness. This turns abstract theory into the concrete and the repeatable and the psychological work. Narrative tools that are work that focalization, granularity, and the mode of narration. Arjun Tara's hybrid focalization explains here why the game narratives feel simultaneously intimate and the authored, why the players see through their avatar's eyes yet remain aware of the external framing. And this duality creates a powerful meaning effects that traditional linear media cannot replicate. The semiotic structure of the player character. Here, the Velas model clarifies that the avatar we control is never identical with the character we feel really we are. Now, this semiotic gap here shows and creates emotional depth and allows players to experience both mastery and the vulnerability simultaneously. Now, God of War or a narrative analysis case study. Now, Cass's close reading of the God of War shows here a single game series can map an entire mythic arc. Now, Kratos moves from the rag-filled anti-hero to reluctant and the reluctant father, embodying the archetypal transformation through the player-controlled action. Temporal frames and the time in video game narratives. Now, Ziegler and Matthias here reveal that the games layer multiple temporal frames at once. Now, while players feel the mythic time passing while the real world minutes tick by. Now, this comparison and the expansion of the time intensify the emotional weight of the archetypal journeys. After that, RPGs as modern myth making. Now, RPG is its full form is role play game. Now, Craig positions here RPGs as the print era successor of the oral folklore. Players do not merely just listen to myth, but they collectively author it and forging a community and identity into the process. Now, this makes a tabletop into a live action RPGs powerful vehicles for the contemporary myth making. Now, game is designed for narrative architect. Jenkins here reframes games as a narrative architecture rather than a linear plots. Why? That players explore story through the movement and the choice. When combined with the assets emphasize on the simulation, and this approach explains why the mythical worlds in game feels alive and inhabited. From simulation and to interactive myth. Erseth here instead that simulation is the true engine of the games. When that engine powers mythic structures, players discover story that really feels alive and is authored by them and their free choices. This synthesis of the simulation and the myth marks the distinctive power of the contemporary video games. Finding the self in role-playing games. Bowman here shows that how role-play model games lets the player rehearse the alternative selves and life paths through the mythic play. They practice courage, compassion, and trickster cunnings, and they find their own moral choices. Now, this experience translates into the real-world identity work that traditional stories rarely are achieved. My hypothesis is here justified with the proven evidence that games transform myth into the active machine mediated storytelling where player character embody layered identities through the episodic structure, and the interactive tools like the hybrid focalization and the multi-layered temporality turn the monomyth into the lived experience with the meaningful engagement. While the critics here reveal that the limits of the monomyth, they also confirm the enduring power of the archetypes in plural digital forms, showing that games shift from the myth from passive reception to the participatory experience that fosters the individuation and the narrative plurality. My lessons, which I have shown here, the digital age games restore myths communal function by letting players co-create narratives that shapes their personal and collective identity and reduce the isolation. Here, games challenges the monomyth, fostering the inclusive and the diverse story around the figures like the heroine, witcher, and the trickster. Here, archetypes become a lived experience that helping the players achieve the individuation through the direct engagement. Here, temporal frames turn myth into the personal journeys and empowering agencies. Games just not democratize just myth making, revitalizing the storytelling as a tool for the identity, education, and the collective meaning in the digital age. The conclusion: video games have carried a mythic structures for the oral traditional into the interactive digital age, transforming archetypes from the abstract symbols into the lived experience shaped by the player's choice. Simulation, the limitation of the monomyth are challenged through the narrative plurality, hybrid focalization, and the emergent storytelling that embrace the diversity and the community. Now players gain agency once reserved for the storytellers, becoming an active participant in the cultural myth making through the spatial and the temporal narrative system, enriching both individual identity and the collective dialogue. The machine has not replaced the myth, but revitalizing and the democratizing it, offering powerful tools for the self discovery into the digital age. These are my learning outcomes, and these are the limitations and the scope for research, which shows the exploration of the emerging of technologies like VR, AR, and I, featuring the future myth storytelling. Here is an infographic of my whole presentation. These are the reference. Thank you, everyone. Now questions are welcome.
So my question is, in a digital economy driven by micro transactions and rewards, how does commercialization affect mythic storytelling in games?
In the contemporary gaming industry, the profiters and the makers, whenever we play games, they shows the upgrades and rewards while we win the game, and purchases, which shows that myth making is kind of being dominated by the consumptions, and that consumptions are overshading the myth. But if we truly experience that, then even if we see the consumptions, but the real connection into the player and the game is still there. That emotional depth is there, and the connection of the individual choice, individual moral decisions, and how to choose a journey and how to conclude it, it is still there. So even if there are rewards and the purchases and the upgrades, we are still feel connected within the game, even if there is a consumption of that marketing. So that is my answer.
So I want to ask that in a global digital culture where players experience the same game differently, does a universal myth still exist or has it become personal?
In today's digital life, we all play games, and we play from the different cultures. Even someone is playing from Gujarat, and if someone is playing from the Kerala, their cultures are different, their ideas are different, so the thinking is different about the game and the journey. And if the journeys are different, the perspectives naturally should be the different. Now it shows that it is played the game is played by the frequent perspective with a unique way. Now this breaks a one fixed idea and one fixed perspective of myth that applies to everyone. Here it is instead the each player here shows a different perspective and new ideas. As a result, these myths are in a contemporary world become a diversible and flexible, not just a one fixed perspective, and it becomes a deeply connected with us. So thank you, this is from my side.
By combining Dhwani theory, practical criticism, and archetypal criticism, it becomes possible to uncover implicit ideological message in discourse. This is my hypothesis and research question. Dhwani theory. The first thing, suggestion and the hidden meaning. The concept of Dhwani developed by Anand Vardhan explained that the deepest meaning of a language lies in the suggestion rather than a literal expression. That when we suggest something, that is the deepest meaning of the word or phrase or the language. Dhwani includes suggested meaning beyond denotation and the implication. Dhwani is not for only the denotation and implication which we can get and borrow from something somewhere, often explained through a rasa figures and narrative context. This concept helps interpret implicit ideological meaning in discourse and narratives. Literary language communicates and depicts meaning through a implicit suggestion rather than a literal statement. The second one is the reading between the lines, close textual analysis in a practical criticism. The method of a practical criticism emphasizes analyzing language closely to reveal hidden meaning. The method of practical criticism emphasizes close reading of a language without relying on a external context, allowing readers to interpret one ambiguity and figurative expression. From that, the reader can understand thoroughly the text and also apply their own experience in the text. Close reading helps identify tone, figurative language, and the rhetorical framing in a discourse. Rhetorical scholars further argues that figurative language shapes the interpretation and the persuasion. The third one is the figures that shapes meaning, figurative language and the rhetorical interpretation. Scholars note that figures of speech helps shapes meaning and guide how audience respond to text or message. When we use metaphors and other figure of speech in our text, that shows how we can give something more to the speech or the language. Figures of speech plays a central role in the constructing meaning and the argument. Thus, discourse often relies on a metaphor, symbols, and rhetorical framing that we also discuss in further. Discourse and the ideology, language, representation, and the power. Critical discourse analysis reveals that language is never neutral. Language is never become a neutral because it's both sides, a reader side also and the another side also. It is an active reflection of ideological beliefs and a social power dynamics. Critical discourse analysis shows that the language reflects ideological beliefs. Also, talk about that the ideologies are shared representation of the social groups. That the ideologies are also come from the social groups, not from the individual people. Media discourse therefore constructs social reality through language and the narrative framing. Stories that structure the cultures, mythic narrative patterns that you can also connect with the archetypal criticism where the patterns and mythical characters are used in the today's stories. Narratives often reflects recurring myth structures that shape how cultures interpret human experience. We also can take some ideas from our mythical structures and our myths. Literary texts frequently draw upon universal narrative patterns such as the hero's journey, the quest, the fall, and the rebirth, which appears across different historical periods and societies. According to Northrop Frye, literature is deeply connected to mythic patterns that organize stories into a symbolic structures. This archetypal form allows reader to recognize narrative as the part of a broader cultural tradition. Thus, examining mythic narrative patterns reveals how literature and discourse not only tell stories but also structural cultural understanding and ideological meaning. Tracing the research path, methodology, and the analytical approach. The study of use qualitative interpretive approach to explores how deeper meanings and ideological perspectives are embedded in discourse. That's also following one scholarly argument that discourse analysis helps reveal how language reflects social belief and ideological structure. Here are also steps of the point of how the discourse was follow the mythical structures and the criticism. A converging framework, integrating Dhwani, practical criticism, and archetypal criticism. Combining this all three theory and how we can understand the discourse of media and other parts. By integrating this perspective, the framework enables a deeper interpretation of a discourse by identifying suggestions, symbolic patterns, and the rhetorical structure within a language. Similarly, Northrop Frye's archetypal criticism identifies recurring mythic structure that shape narratives and cultural interpretation. People are also think from the perspective of myths and other religious things and spiritual things. By integrating this approach, this framework enables a deeper interpretation of a discourse by revealing suggestion, symbolism, and the narrative patterns within a language. The theory of a dhwani explains how text communicates, suggests, or implied meanings beyond a literal expression. Interpreting contemporary narratives, how the contemporary narratives shows the connection with the dhwani, practical criticism, and the archetypal criticism. The integrated frameworks reveals how contemporary narratives communicate meaning through a symbolism, figurative language, and the narrative patterns. Nowadays we also saw the many things happen, and we connect that thing with our mythical structures, and we also connect that things with the practical criticism and archetypal criticism. Using dhwani, deeper suggested meaning in discourse can be identified beyond a literal expression. Close reading reveals how figurative language and the rhetorical framing shape interpretation with the discourse. And at the same time, Northrop Frye's archetypal criticism highlight recurring myth patterns that structure cultural narratives. Together, this perspective reveals the discourse communicates meaning not only through explicit meaning statements, but also through a symbolic culture and the ideological dimensions. Closing reflection, the conclusion. This study demonstrates that discourse often communicates meaning through suggestion, figurative language, and the narrative symbols rather than through explicit statements alone. In dhwani, the suggestive elements is a predominant. The word forms and the figures only serves as the vehicles that bring forth the intended aesthetics and the emotional response in a reader. Similarly, close reading in a practical criticism reveals how figurative language and tone shape the interpretation of the peoples and the society. Text reflects underlying ideological frameworks, guides readers understand of a social structure and the power dynamics, how to come to know about the power dynamics and how to come to know about the social structures. Together, this approach shows that discourse should be interpreted not only through its literal meaning, but also through its symbolic and ideological dimension. That's why I'll choose these three theory and combine them, because I want to share that thing. We are understand the discourse from only literal meaning. We can't see the symbolic or the mythic or the archetypal meaning of the thing. Justification of my research question and hypothesis. Modern discourse often communicates some meaning through a symbolism, suggestion, and the narrative patterns rather than a direct statement. Dhwani emphasized that the deeper suggested meaning in a text take a priority, with words and figures acting only as a tool to evoke aesthetic and emotional response. Similarly, archetypal criticism also discussed that the narrative rely on a recurring mythical structures that shapes the interpretation. Therefore, the hypothesis that discourse constructs meaning through suggestion, figurative language, and the archetypal patterns in a theoretical justified. Here is the infographics from where you get the whole overview of my presentation. Scholarly foundation. Here is the learning outcome. Thank you. Now you have any questions, so you can ask.
So, Siddharth, my question is, in what ways do figurative language, suggested meaning, and archetypal narrative patterns influence how audience interpret modern media and the cultural narratives?
Question answer of this question is that today we only rely on the source which is provided by the media. We cannot see the symbolic or of the text or the I want to give one example. Then we can show the advertisement of a Apple phone, where you can't so think about the how the thing was done in that advertisement. So this is the answer of this question. Another question.
So my question is, how does integrating dhwani with Richard's practical criticism and Frye's archetypal criticism expand our understanding of hidden meanings in contemporary discourse?
Yeah. So answer of this question is that the movie is Everything Everywhere All at Once. It is released in 2012. Where when we saw that movie, we can understand that how Dhwani theory, how practical criticism, and how archetypal criticism was very clearly shown is that movie. And when we want to show the thing which is going on, and when we show the inner meaning of the text, so we can apply this theory in that. And in understanding of this contemporary discourse, these theories are very useful for that. So that is from my side. Thank you.
So, hello everyone, myself Siddhiba Gohil, and my today's presentation topic is the Natya Shastra and Indian cinema, ancient roots of a modern spectacle. So, here is my academic details and presentation details. This is table of content. So, my research question is: to what extent does 21st century Indian cinema function as a virtual meta theater that prioritizes the ancient codes of rasa and abhinaya over Western convention of realism? And my hypotheses are: the enduring success of the Indian blockbuster movies is predicted on its ability to transition ancient performance theory into the digital age, creating a liminal state where the technological spectacle serves to amplify traditional emotional realization. This synthesizes suggests that modern CGI and high decibel sound system do not replace Natya Shastra's principles, but rather act as contemporary Aharya Abhinaya, enabling a mass rasabhava experience that reinforces a unified national and moral identity. So let's start with introduction. The fifth Veda, traditionally referred as a Pancham Veda, was created to democratize spiritual and moral education through the medium of performances. Indian cinema's rejection of Western realism is a continuation of idealized reality, where emotions are amplified to achieve aesthetic bliss. And we can see that digital performance is not a rupture from tradition, but a contemporary manifestation of ancient performance codes situated with a new technical framework. We can see that the Natya Shastra is fundamentally understood as a fifth Veda, a text designed to make complex spiritual truths accessible through the joy of performance. And we can see that, unlike Hollywood, which often prioritizes realism, Indian popular cinema prioritizes rasa realization, the shared emotional state of the viewer. As David Hughes argued that digital screen has become a virtual meta theater. In this space, modern technology doesn't destroy tradition. Rather, it acts as a new stage of ancient emotional archetypes, providing that the fundamental way Indian audiences consume performance remains rooted in Sanskriti principles. So, the rasa of Bollywood, as rasa is in literary means juice and essence. In Natya Shastra, rasa is not emotion itself, but the aesthetic flavor experienced by the Sahirdaya through the actor's skill. Rather, lack of focus, the multi-genre masala format is systematic implementation of the eight rasas strategy, ensuring a balanced emotional meal that prevents fatigue and maximizes audience engagement. Rasa is characterized by tasting an emotion at an aesthetic distance, leading to a state of ananda. And we can say the technology acts as a bridge that allows for a derealized environment where internal state can be externalized and shared by thousands of people stimulously. So the next one is the from eighth rasas, deep divine, in Rodra and Bhayanakaras. Rodra Rasa, rooted in rage and the desire for justice, amplified by the angry young man archetype, where fury serves as collective moral purpose. For that, I would like to take example from Pushpa movie that how that character, the protagonist, he is suppressed by society, and for his justice, he he fight for his rights. And the next one is Bhayanaka Rasa, the aesthetic aestheticization of red used for establish the peril that the hero must overcome. It creates an atmosphere of suspense that validates the hero's eventual bravery. In Indian cinema, Rodra is rarely mindless. It is a righteous anger used as a tool to fight social adharma, effectively using spectacle to mobilize audience sentiment towards nationalism. And we can see that the interplay between Rodra and Bhayanaka felicitates a shared emotional release where the viewer's identification with the hero's fury leads to a state of aesthetic resolution. The next one is Bibhatsya and Shantarasa. Traditionally, Bibhatsya Rasa linked to the portrayal of the repulsive. It is used in cinema to represent moral decay and social corruption, forcing a moral awakening in this spectacle. The cinematic display of disgust act as a psychological cleansing, where the audience rejection of the ugly prepares them for higher ethical realization. Edited by later Shantarasa, which was edited later than the other rasas, and it was added by Abhinav Gupta. Shantarasa represent the ultimate emotional hemothesis and the restoration of order. The resolution of a film into Shant often reserved as metaphor for a unified, stable nation where internal and external conflict are resolved. Following the Natya Shastra code, a narrative must move the audience through the turbulence of Vibhatsa to reach the stillness of Shanta, effectively harmonizing the spectator's psyche. The another one is archetypes and Abhinaya in it. Agnika is there are four, and from that Agnika is the one master of posture, gesture, stylized combat. Cinema utilizes hyper physicality. As we know that a hero should be perfect by looks and by his intentions and thoughts, and he should be perfect overall. And like that only, in movies we see that how slow motion and other technical precision are used for the hero's movement to make him more flawless. Vachika is one another verbal in which a verbal way beyond language that includes a heightened orality. And we can see the playback singing are used as a spiritual extension of the character's voice. Aharya, lavish costumes and makeups are now augmented by CGI, digital costumes and environments, creating a hyper aestheticized space that felicitates rasa realization. Satvika, the actor's ability to manifest authenticative inner vibrations such as single tear, facial twitch, or expressions they naturally came up with is a is captured by the digital camera to forge a visceral connection with the audience. The star the star acts as a medium through the medium that translates the metaphysical reality of uh, of the script into a tangible emotional experience for the Sahridaya. So that we can see that by this all performances we can connect with movie and in its character naturally. The leading star as modern Nayaka. Modern heroes are characterized by the Dirhodatta type, characterized by self-control and unwavering moral resolve. As I said, that hero should be always flawless, as that make his image in front of audience more respect he gains by this. The star operates as a transparent medium, transferring into the pure bhava to the spectre without letting their personal ego interfere. We can see that following Sanskrit theory, the actor must remain internally untouched by the emotional they display, maintaining a technical precision that ensure the audience rasa realization is pure and controlled. We can see that the star's mass appeal is rooted in their ability to manifest deep sattvika traits, physical manifestation of an internal spirit that resonate with the audience collective psyche. Myth structure. Plotinus revolves around the fulfillment of duty, dharma over individual desire. The protagonist idea is defined through their role within the family and social hierarchy. We can see that happy ending is a technical requirement of Sanskrit dramaturgy. Good defeating evil is presented as a cosmic necessity to maintain universal order, and literal rebirth is a common trope used to resolve moral conflict that cannot be settled in a single lifetime, representing a derealized extension of the performance space. We can see that because the audience know the moral outcome, the focus shifts from the what happens to how it happened, how it feels, prioritizing the flavor of the journey over narrative surprise. The next topic is cinema as the national imaginary. We can see that cinema provides a shared moral vocabulary for a diverse population. The screen acts as a secular fifth Veda where collective values are reinforced. We can see that how while people are watching movie from theater, all they whistle and they connect with movie, and they all have same emotions over themselves, so that they connect in themselves. So here is my hypothesis justified that Indian cinema function as a modern virtual meta theater is just justified through a multi-layer methodology, as David Hughes argue. On meta, digital performance is a contemporary manifestation of ancient performance codes rather than a departure from them. This technical spectacle is not a mere decoration; it serves as a modern aharya abhinaya, and we can see that by bribing ancient sutras with 21st century digital aesthetics, we prove that the Natya Shastra remains the active operating system of India's visual culture. So here is my conclusion. To conclude, 21st century Indian cinema function as sophisticated virtual meta theater, providing that ancient Sanskrit aesthetics are not obsolete but have evolved into a resilient digital contemporary manifestation. And we can see that national imaginary as these myth structures provide a vital cultural compass for a modern globalized India to negotiate its identity, moral order, and social coherence. Ultimately, the enduring popularity of the Indian blockbuster demonstrates that Natya Shastra remains the essential adaptive operating system that harmonizes the collective spirit of the nation through the transformative power of performance. So here are my learning outcomes. These are my references, and thank you. Questions are welcome.
So Siddhiba, my question is, how does the masala format use the asta rasa to keep the audience engaged without getting tired?
The masala format is a deliberate aesthetic strategy that mirrors a complete meal. By rotating through the 8 rasas, we can see that the filmmakers and writers use many other emotions to show that all the emotional wide emotional spectrum, like they are not making others the viewers or readers getting tired of the story or other storyline or other things, because their variety prevents emotional fatigue, because as soon as one emotion like sadness becomes heavy, it is balanced by humor or other emotions. We can see that maintaining high engagement for the duration for a long time, we can see that how people are like doesn't have that much time to see long episodes or movie. So for making them for making them interested, a writer and filmmaker make different emotions to balance it. So that's all. Second question.
So my question is that can modern CGI and loud sound be considered a digital version of a Aharya Abhinaya? Question.
Yes, in the Natya Shastra, Aharya Abhinaya reference to the external tools like costume props and stage decor used to help audience feel an emotion. In modern, we can see that we have CFX, CGI, VFX, and other sound systems serves this exact purpose. They aren't just special effects, but they are digital costumes, and it creates environment that amplify the mythic and emotional reality of the story for a 21st century audience. So that's all from my side. Thank you.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. First of all, congratulations to all of you. And one thing I want to just, we can say, focus is here that I have not attended all the presentations. So I have attended last 5 presentations. So I can give remarks based on that, because on online also I am not able to, we can say, watch all these things because of some works. So first, Priyanka Nakrani, your presentation topic was good. I understand that you are not satisfied with your marks, because I can easily find it out from your face. But the thing is that you have, we can say, done one mistake in citation. I think that the citation I cannot open, so that you have to check. Otherwise, the topic and the explanation was really good. You, we can say, talked on these archetypal patterns in 2, we can say, web series, Stranger and this Game of Thrones. So, and again, very well interpreted in these all these things. So I like your presentation. Another thing is that you can add these infographics. As ma'am and me know that in last 3 days, sir suggested that you have to do 2 to 3 new things. One is banner you have to add. Another is overall, we can say, the one infographics of your presentation. And another third thing is that you have to, we can say, give your presentation to AI, okay, to check the, we can say, relevance and all these things. So many of you have integrated these 2 ideas at least you have integrated, and that I can find it out in some of you. Okay, so overall your presentation was good. Grishma, again, your topic is good. You have connected archetypal criticism with Vampire Diaries. Again, infographics you have also added and well answered orally based on your understanding. You replied, so that is the good thing. Nidhi, again, your presentation was good. From myth to, we can say, the machine in context of video games. So again, new ideas. We also studied this archetypal criticism, but we just try to compare this topic, archetypal criticism and Northrop Frye, and these theories with Bollywood, Hollywood movies, because at that time these web series and video games were not that much popular. But you all added these things, so again, it is a good idea. Again, one thing I like most is that you have added limitations and the further scope of your research in your presentation. So again, that we can say lead to the another direction for, we can say, the new student. So that is a good idea. And sources also I find it out good from the Taylor and Francis and Sage you have cited. So good presentation. Siddharth, and your presentation topic is good, well explained on archetypal criticism and Dhwani theory and all that. But one, we can say, the suggestion I want to give is that just try to, we can say, choose the appropriate slides, because in slides number 5, 7 and 9 your content extend beyond the slides. So that you have to, we can say, check, okay, before, we can say, the final preparation and the uploading thing. So that you can just find it out. Otherwise, overall presentation was good. Siddhiba, again, we can say, presented well on the Natya Shastra and Indian cinema. Okay, specifically Bollywood movies, you just we can say use as an example in your slides. So good that you have presented, but you can we can say add current examples while giving the answer. Specifically, when Nidhi asked questions regarding this masala effect in that, so you can just give current examples. For example, right now we have this Mahabharata and the Ramayana serial, so you can find it out some difference compared to the previous one, that popular Ramayana and Mahabharata. Okay, so how we can find it out? New charm, new, we can say, the technology, sound effects, some kinds of a masala kind of a thing, so audience can like very much. Okay, so that examples you can add while giving answers, so that we can say shows your intellectuality, and we can say that represents that you are aware of such kinds of current updates or scenario. Okay, so these have you can just give your answers. Otherwise, overall presentation was good. So and thank you all of you. Other students, your presentations, topics, and all these things are also good. I can find it out your topics, and I'll also find it out your marks as well. So again, good. Congratulations to all of you, and best of luck for your last presentation tomorrow. Thank you. Now we are ending this live streaming here. Thank you all of you.